Chapter 749. So this is what team battle is all about. Li Yu sat upright in the void, watching this so-called team battle. He shook his head helplessly. It wasn't because Team China was too strong and had effortlessly flattened their opponents. A confrontation of this level could no longer enter Li Yu's eyes. What Li Yu really cared about was how the Lord God calculated and dealt with who was stronger and who was weaker during a team battle, and how much damage was dealt to each other. According to Li Yu's original thoughts, the Overgod's calculation method was very likely similar to a game, with a series of calculation formulas. In fact, the Overgod's method of dealing with things is simply too violent. After watching this team battle, Li Yu completely understood the Overgod's method of dealing with things. There were no so-called calculation formulas, no so-called damage settings. The Overgod directly put all kinds of different power systems together, letting them collide with each other. Who was strong and who was weak would be determined through the collision. This method is more realistic. There's no question of how much damage a skill must deal when it's used. Li Yu smiled, raising his eyes to sweep a glance over the void. There's no more profit to be extracted from this world. At this point, Li Yu had already obtained what he should have obtained. He had even practiced the controls. There wasn't much value in remaining here. The Overgod's method of controlling the reincarnation space is to use laws to pass through the various worlds, connecting these worlds with order and laws. This is why worlds with different systems can belong to a single entity. Matter and order were the foundation that every world had to have. According to the Overgod's method of rule system, Li Yu could also use his own laws, order, and matter to unify the worlds like the Overgod. To me, the greatest harvest of the Overgod's world is here. Li Yu's final path was definitely to become a primordial origin, becoming the primordial origin of heaven and earth. Everything originated from primordial chaos, and everything returned to primordial chaos. When Li Yu became a primordial origin, he used his own laws to pass through all worlds. Just like how the Overgod controlled the reincarnation world, everything was incorporated into his own system. We've already gotten our hands on the loot. If we continue to stay here, we'll just be watching kids fight. In Li Yu's eyes, the battle between reincarnators was like a fight between children. In fact, it was worse than a fight between children. There was no point in continuing to watch. Sai, we should go back. Li Yu stood up, turned his head, and said to Kai, "Is His Majesty going back?" "That's great. This place is actually quite boring." Kai had been bored for a long time. She had followed Li Yu here and watched him sitting cross-legged in the void every day. Besides this Master God's light, there was nothing else. Team China has already made me use a lot of cheats. If you still can't survive like this and end up as miserable as before, then you can only blame yourselves. In truth, Li Yu didn't care about Team China's life or death. After the omnipotent cheat had hacked the Lord God, he had essentially become one with the Lord God. In a sense, the Lord God was in Li Yu's control. The Lord God's resurrection rule and the rule of creating bodies and godly souls are all very valuable. Other than the way the Lord God controlled the various worlds, the Lord God's greatest value didn't lie in its various exchanges, but in its resurrection and creation. With the 9 turns Yang Grass's resurrection rule and the Lord God's resurrection rule, I can create a resurrection spell. Although Li Yu had created a body and soul countless times, he had never done this before. However, this was all thanks to the system. Now that he had the Lord God's method of creating bodies and godly souls, Li Yu could even try creating creations. Let's return. Glancing at the Lord God's light, Li Yu smiled and waved his hand. A light flashed, and the two disappeared without a trace, returning to the shop space. This trip to the Lord God's world could be said to have brought back nothing, but it could also be said to have brought back countless things. Li Yu didn't collect any resources, but the countless resources in the Lord God's world could be obtained by Li Yu from the Lord God. Your Majesty, the Golden Monkey King just reported that there's been some progress regarding the rumor of the immortal abode. When Li Yu arrived at the main hall of the immortal abode, Xie Ling came forward to report. There's been progress regarding the rumor? Seems like the Golden Monkey King's dog nose is quite sharp. The so-called rumor of the immortal abode was naturally the matter of the group of cultivators who attacked the net and were killed by the net. A rumor had spread across the southern heaven ocean, saying that an immortal abode had appeared on South Parting Island and had fallen into the hands of a group of natives. This attracted some greedy people to come and seek death. Although it didn't affect Liu much, it was still very disgusting. Before heading to the Lord God's world, Liu had instructed the Golden Monkey King to investigate the rumor, and now there was some progress. I want to see who's behind this. Liu stepped forward and instantly arrived at the Immortal Mountain Immortal Court on South Parting Island. The rumor originated from the Southern Heaven region's Ocean Cliff City. Seeing the information sent back by the Golden Monkey King, Liu was a little surprised. The Southern Heaven region's Ocean Cliff City was a coastal area of the Southern Heaven region and was considered inland. It was hundreds of millions of miles away from South Parting Island. So how could there be a rumor about South Parting Island? Who's behind all this? Or is there really an immortal abode here? Liu walked out of the main hall and released his spirit to sense the heaven and earth. His enormous spirit permeated the heaven and earth, and every corner of South Parting Island was scanned by Liu's spirit. There's nothing strange. If there really was an immortal abode, it would have been discovered by Liu. Now, Liu didn't find anything suspicious. It seemed that the immortal abode didn't exist. I still have to make a trip to the Southern Heaven region's Ocean Cliff City. With a wave of his hand, he took out the 9 Dragons wishful carriage that he hadn't used for a long time. At this moment, the 9 Dragons wishful carriage had fused with the black ship of the Vajra King and became even more extraordinary. With a wave of his hand, he released the 9 Dragons wishful carriage, which turned into a flying boat and whistled all the way to the inland of the Southern Heaven region. The flying boat broke through the sky and flew all the way through the void at an extremely fast speed. The Southern Heaven region is really vast. Flying all the way, Liu also saw the scene below. The entire Tianan Sea region was dotted with countless islands. Some islands were even larger than South Parting Island. The vast sea and sky galloping through. Not long after, a vast and boundless land appeared in front of him. The Southern Heaven region is only one of the regions of this world. The vastness of this world is simply immeasurable. The land in front was only the southern coastal area of the Southern Heaven region, and the Ocean Cliff City was in this area. No wonder called the Ocean Cliff City. It's really like a cliff. It was a huge mountain towering into the clouds. Strangely, the side of the mountain facing the sea seemed to have been flattened by a sword, forming a smooth and steep endless cliff. On this cliff, there were countless passages, countless buildings, and countless caves. All of this constituted the Ocean Cliff City. Lowering the flying boat and landing at the bottom of the cliff near the sea, Liu officially set foot on the inland of the Southern Heaven region. Chapter 750. It was a wharf. On the endless coastline, there were countless boats coming and going. After passing through the wharf, there was a wide bluestone road ahead. The road led straight to a cliff, and a huge gate tower stood at the bottom of the cliff. This was the city gate of Ocean Cliff City. The city gate was wide open, and there were no guards at the entrance. Cultivators from all over the place could pass through without any hindrance. It's said that Ocean Cliff City is a trading city set up by the Tianshui Pavilion of the Heavenly South. It seems defenseless, but the entire Ocean Cliff City is actually a huge formation. After entering the city, Liu scanned the city with his divine soul and instantly figured out the ins and outs of Ocean Cliff City. The city, which seemed to have been built by cutting off the cliff, was completely enveloped by a huge immortal formation. Everyone who entered the city was actually enveloped by the formation. Immortal King Realm cultivators? Liu smiled when he sensed the Tao laws flowing in the formation. Tianshui Jinjuan from the Tianshui Pavilion is worthy of his nickname. His comprehension of the water laws has reached the peak. Unfortunately, water alone could not break through the King Realm and become an immortal emperor. Fellow Taoist, please. Just as Liu was looking around to check out the situation in Ocean Cliff City, a fat middle-aged cultivator came up to him with a smile and cupped his hands in greeting at Liu. Fellow Taoist, is this your first time in Ocean Cliff City? Did you come here specifically because you heard about the non-li immortal abode? The middle-aged cultivator nodded at Liu with a smile. Fellow Taoist, we came here specifically because of the appearance of the non-li immortal abode. We're planning to explore the non-li immortal abode. Would you like to come with us? Huh, you're all here for me? Liu glanced at the middle-aged man with an intrigued expression. Are you also planning to explore the non-li immortal abode? Of course. The middle-aged cultivator nodded. The non-li immortal abode has appeared, but it fell into the hands of a group of natives. How can the holy land of immortal mansions fall into the hands of natives? As he said this, a look of righteous indignation appeared on the middle-aged man's face. Previously, there were some fellow Taoists who went to South Parting Island to investigate, but unfortunately, they fell under the tricks of the natives. When we go to South Parting Island, we must not be careless. Of course, Liu pretended to reply, but in his heart, he snorted disdainfully at the so-called indigenous trick. Since fellow Taoist is interested, why don't we talk in private? At this point, the middle-aged man extended his hand and made a pleased gesture. No problem. No problem. Liu was about to pursue the matter of the rumors, so he naturally agreed to the middle-aged man's suggestion without hesitation. They followed the middle-aged man all the way forward. After passing through a passageway carved out of the cliff, the two of them arrived at a cave residence. As he stepped into the cave, the door behind him closed with a kacha sound. Several silhouettes rushed out with whistling sounds. Ha ha! We've caught another fat sheep. For cultivators leaped out, and together with the middle-aged man, they surrounded Liu. They rubbed their fists and palms, and their eyes shone with a fierce light. Do I look like a fat sheep? Without a doubt, Liu was tricked. However, Liu sneered. You're trying to trick me? Capture. Reaching out and grabbing, a total of 5 cultivators, including the middle-aged man, were all caught in the hand of a giant palm that Liu materialized. Senior, spare us. Senior, spare us. Seeing that they had kicked an iron plate, the 5 robbers hurriedly begged for mercy. The murderous aura is extremely dense. You've tricked many people, right? I can't spare you. With a wave of his hand, the 5 robbers were crushed and turned into flying ashes. With a wave of his hand, Liu absorbed the souls of the few people and carefully investigated the situation here. The source of this rumor is actually from the inland. Who on earth was spreading such rumors? What is the purpose of creating such a mess? Liu was speechless about this rumor. With the current strength of South Parting Island, unless it was an immortal emperor, it would be as stable as Mount Tai. Even a true immortal would not be interested in a mere rumor about the birth of an immortal mansion. Immortal kings would probably be too lazy to even look at it. Immortal emperors were even more unlikely to care. What was the point of such a rumor other than to disgust people? Boom! At this time, the tightly shut door of the cave was smashed open from the outside with a loud bang. A group of cultivators wearing heavy armor and holding long spears like soldiers clustered around a man in a brocade robe and stepped into the cave. According to investigation, there are villains gathered in this cave. The man in brocade robe waved his hand, and a group of soldiers rushed into the cave and searched every room in the cave. Then they surrounded Liu. Are you alone? Speak. Where are your companions? The man in brocade robe pointed at Liu. His eyes widened in anger and shouted loudly. Ha! Glancing at the man in brocade robe in front of him, Liu smiled and shook his head. How interesting. Right after I killed a few bandits, you guys appeared immediately. Preposterous. The man in brocade roared, unable to restrain his anger. As the law enforcement team of Ocean Cliff City, we have always been impartial and upright. How can we allow you to slander us? These words were said in an imposing manner, and they were said openly and above board. But his pupils seemed to contract faintly. Of course I won't slander you. Liu smiled and raised a finger. A light flashed on the tip of his finger, and the scene of the bandits and the man in brocade robe dividing the loot appeared. I took their souls and happened to see this. Actually, I didn't want to bother with this kind of nonsense at all if you didn't run into it yourself. Bastard, how dare you frame me? Take him down. Kill him without mercy. Seeing the evidence in Li Yu's hand, the man in brocade robes' eyes suddenly turned cold, and he directly gave the order to kill the bandits. At the same time, the man in brocade robe was not idle. Tianshui talisman. A talisman appeared in his hand, and with a loud bang, a vast amount of water vapor surged up, and the blue water was endless. This water talisman has some merits. Seeing this water light and feeling the true meaning of imperial water, Li Yu nodded slightly. This should be the talisman passed down by Tianshui Jinjuan. Although it was refined by a disciple, it still has some true meaning. Of course, in front of Li Yu, even if Tianshui Jinjuan was here in person, it would not be enough. Not to mention a talisman refined by a disciple of his sect. With a soft hum, the Tianshui talisman suddenly disappeared, as if it had never existed. How? How is this possible? This is an immortal talisman. How can it fail? The man in brocade robe was dumbfounded. Of course, he did not know that the immortal talisman had failed because of Li Yu's hum, and he did not think in that direction at all. Instead, he suspected that the immortal talisman had failed. Of course, the immortal talisman did not fail. You want it? Then I'll return it to you. With a wave of his hand, the Tianshui talisman flashed again, but the target was the man in brocade robe and his party. Splash! The water light surged, and the waves surged. The angry waves only rolled, and the man in brocade robe and his party of soldiers all disappeared without a trace, as if they had melted into the water light. Tianshui Jinjuan's attainments in the art of water are indeed extraordinary to be able to utilize the dissolving properties of water to such an extent. After destroying the water light with a wave of his hand, Li Yu's gaze turned to the interior of Tiannan. Since I'll have to go deep into Tiannan to investigate the rumors, it's a good opportunity to see the elegance of the Tiannan cultivators. Chapter 751. Outside of Ocean Cliff City, a large river flowed around the cliff and into the sea. At this time, Li Yu had already left Ocean Cliff City and released his dragon boat to go against the current towards the interior of the heavenly south. Although this trip was to investigate the truth of the rumors, Li Yu didn't care too much about this truth. On the contrary, he wanted to use this opportunity to travel the heavenly south and understand the various powers there. With South Parting Island's current development, the region outside the heavenly south wasn't enough for them to develop. In the future, South Parting Island would have to deal with the major powers of the heavenly south. Thus, Li Yu's goal was to understand the various powers in the heavenly south in advance. Little Ting Ting will probably stomp her feet in anger if she finds out that I'm playing around by myself outside. Li Yu sat in the lotus position in the cabin with a jug of wine in his hand. He gently poured out a cup of amber-colored wine with a refreshing aroma. Tungching has done quite well. She really did manage to brew Origin Immortal wine with the origin fruit she brought back from old Demon Han's world. He took a sip from the cup. The wine's fragrance seeped into his nostrils and was incomparably wonderful. It was worthy of being called an immortal wine. Of course, this so-called immortal wine only had a superb taste. Apart from this, it was a plaything for eating, drinking, and having fun. It didn't have much to do with the word immortal. He allowed the 9 dragons' Rui carriage, which had transformed into an ordinary dragon boat, to move against the current. Li Yu narrowed his eyes and leisurely sipped his wine. He was extremely carefree. However, the heavenly south was also a world of cultivators. In this kind of world, it was all too common for cultivators to fight to the death for various reasons. For example, right now, Li Yu is encountering such a situation. Boom! On the surface of the water, several dozen miles ahead, a thunderous roar resounded. A dazzling bolt of lightning snaked down like a lightning dragon and heavily slammed into a ship, resulting in a deafening explosion. Buzz! 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 Countless formations were instantly activated after the ship was attacked. They turned into layers of light barriers that protected the entire ship. However, this bolt of lightning was very extraordinary. The formations on the ship soon couldn't hold on. Boom! After being entangled for a while, the light screen and the lightning on the ship exploded at the same time, dissipating into thin air. Lu Tianming, are you really going to kill them all? A young man holding a bronze lamp rushed out of the ship with the destroyed formation. The copper lamp in his hand burst out a ball of light, protecting him. The young man raised his head and roared angrily. Zhongli, second brother. Third brother has already died in your hands, right? We became sworn brothers, but I didn't expect that you would disregard our brotherhood for the sake of a mere foreign object and lay your hands on third brother. In midair, a black-robed youth floated down, the short hammer in his hand bursting with streaks of lightning. Lu Tianming, don't make it sound so high-sounding. You purposely made friends with third brother. Do you think I don't know what you're planning? Becoming sworn brothers? Only a fool like third brother would believe that you are truly sworn brothers with him, right? That second brother, Zhongli, waved his hand, and the copper lamp burst into flames. His face was ferocious as he fought with his big brother, Lu Tianming. Is this a show of brothers turning against each other? Liu glanced at them and discovered that the two people who were fighting each other in midair were only masters in the mortal realm. With such strength, even the current shout Ting could be slapped to the ground. Liu naturally had no interest in watching the show. However, when Liu's eyes swept over the destroyed ship and saw the corpse in the middle of the ship, a thought suddenly occurred to him. Poor guy. These two so-called sworn brothers were actually up to no good from the beginning. They were both plotting against you. With a wave of his hand, the remaining resentment in the corpse flew out and fell into Liu's hand. A spot of light hovered, and all the remaining information in the remnant of the resentment flowed into Liu's mind. A disciple of the Bai family of Western Qin. A hot-blooded young man with lofty aspirations and lofty aspirations. He wanted to make a name for himself in the land of Tiannan. Unfortunately, he was plotted against and died with grievance. Liu laughed. It seemed that he hadn't felt this hot-blooded and lofty youth for a long time. White clothes whiter than snow, sword energy like frost, riding alone in Jianghu, traveling the world with a sword. This was also my dream back then. With a thought, Liu suddenly came up with an idea. Anyway, he was looking for a way to understand the situation in the Tiannan region. He might as well open a SMUF account. With a shake of his body, he and the dragon boat instantly turned into nothingness and disappeared without a trace. In the next moment, a figure that was exactly the same as the corpse appeared beside the cold corpse in the ship with the destroyed formation. Bai Zhe of Western Qin, since I opened a SMUF account with your identity, I'll end this karma for you and fulfill your wish. With a wave of his hand, the corpse on the ground disappeared without a trace. Then, the clothes on Liu's body instantly changed as well, becoming exactly the same as the corpse. The appearance was the same, the clothes were the same, and all the memories were clear. Liu's SMUF account was officially activated. Boom! The fight in the air finally came to an end. Second brother was no match for big brother. In the end, he was hit in the head by the thunder hammer, and his brain was smashed. Ha ha! Zhongli, you dare to compete with me? After killing the enemy, Lu Tianming looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. He carried Zhongli's corpse and landed on the ship below. Bai Zhe, that kid, I don't know what kind of luck he has to get the Tianshui immortal token. Lu Tianming squatted down with a grin on his face and rummaged through Zhongli's body. Finally, he found a jade token about 3 inches long. This is the token of the Tianshui Pavilion. With this token, I can participate in the Tianshui convention. Once I'm chosen by the Tianshui Pavilion, I can be a disciple of the Tianshui Pavilion and reach the sky in 1 step. Lu Tianming looked at the Tianshui immortal token in his hand and was ecstatic. Ha ha, I finally got it. Bai Zhe, that idiot, dared to trust others so easily when he had such a treasure, and dared to tell others about it. That's the way to death. Yes, that's the way to death. A faint sigh sounded as if it came from the depths of hell. It carried an icy chill that chilled one's heart and bones. You, Lu Tianming suddenly turned around and saw that Bai Zhe, who had died long ago, was standing in front of him, unharmed. Bai Zhe looked expressionlessly at Lu Tianming and then at Zhang Li, who was lying dead on the ground. His eyes were filled with deep pain and disappointment. He's not dead. Lu Tianming's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He leaped up and swung the thunder hammer in his hand, smashing it down on Bai Zhe's head. I really thought of you as my brothers. What a pity. With a sigh, Bai Zhe waved his hand and unsheathed the long sword at his waist. A beam of sword light shot up and tore through the sky. Poof! The sword light broke through the skull. Your swordsmanship. How? The thunder hammer in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. Lu Tianming's face was filled with horror. How is it so powerful? Liu chuckled as he put away his sword. Even if I have to open a smurf account, I'll open a top-notch one. I can't let myself be abused, right? I'm finally done. Sorry for the delay in updating these few days. Chapter 752. The information in Bai Zhe's remnant soul is still too little. With a grab, Zhang Li and Lu Tianming's souls that had not yet dissipated were instantly gathered by Li Yu. With a flash of light in his hand, all the information in the two souls flowed into Li Yu's heart. The Southern Heaven region is vast and boundless. I'm afraid it's not smaller than the 3,000 regions of the upper realm. In such a vast world, there are naturally people at all levels. The Southern Heaven region also had the mortal world, the same rogue cultivators, the same aristocratic families, and the same sect. This pyramid-like structure was the most common in all cultivation worlds. Li Yu's alternate account, Bai Zhe, was born in the cultivation world of the Southern Heaven region, belonging to the middle and lower cultivation families. A sect, especially a top sect with a Lord of Heaven, was the holy land for all the cultivators in the Southern Heaven region. It turns out that the immortal king, that is, the Lord of Heaven, is already so powerful in the Southern Heaven region. Thinking of the group of immortal kings under his command, Li Yu laughed involuntarily. If I directly release a group of immortal kings, the whole Southern Heaven region will be turned upside down. However, even if South Parting Island wanted to develop and grow, as long as there was enough radiation, it was not to establish a country and did not need to occupy a large territory. First, with this alternate account, I'll walk around the Southern Heaven region and experience the addiction of wandering the Jianghu. Stepping out of the ship, invisible waves swept silently, and the ship and the two corpses in it were instantly annihilated, erasing all traces of existence. Bai Zhe of the Western Qin Mansion of the Southern Heaven region, by family's disciple, the family's sword art Starlight Sword Art. There is naturally no problem with the identity and origin of this alternate account, but that Starlight Sword Art, Li Yu couldn't stand it at all. Even if he wanted to open an alternate account, he should at least have a better skill, right? This Starlight Sword Art was completely unpresentable. On the basis of the Starlight Sword Art, a casual extension can create a lot of swordsmanship that could be considered presentable. Starlight, the sky full of stars, there were many things that could be done. For example, the Grand White Chongqing Sword, Bright Dawn Sword, the Three Realms 4 symbols, and the Heavenly Cycle constellation. All right, I'll use Stellar Sword to play this smurf. The long sword in his hand trembled, and the stars in the sky lit up. The starlight was resplendent and dazzling. Stars circled around him. The figure standing with a sword in his hand was like the master of the starry sky. Every move he made resonated with the stars in the sky. His power was terrifying. With a slash of the sword, the stars shook and the sky collapsed. I actually managed to deduce an Immortal King level sword technique by accident. Li Yu smiled and retracted the phenomenon in the sky. He took out the dragon boat again and landed on it. Star-Lord Bai Zhe, what do you think of this title? He stood at the bow of the ship with his hands behind his back. His clothes were fluttering in the wind, and his clothes were whiter than snow. He was simply a handsome and dashing young hero. Bai Zhe's current strength is at the Grandmaster stage. At this Tianshui conference, he could be considered to have met the requirements to participate. Li was also somewhat interested in this so-called Tianshui conference. This kind of sect conference to select disciples would most likely have many factions participating. Riding the boat, Liu traveled against the current. 3 days later, he arrived at the destination of the Tianshui conference. Tianshui Prefecture, the place where the Tianshui Pavilion of the Tianan Great Sect is located, is indeed quite impressive. With the name Tianshui, the entire Tianshui Prefecture was actually a vast and boundless lake. The entire body of water was vast and boundless, as if it was a vast ocean. Countless islands were scattered in the body of water. These islands had mountains, rivers, villages, cities, and countless people living on them. Among them, the center of Tianshui Lake was the base of the Tianshui Pavilion, Immortal Fate Island. This is the location of the Tianshui Conference. The dragon boat stopped beside a huge island in the middle of the lake. Liu stood at the bow of the boat and looked at the huge island with towering mountains in front of him. He smiled and nodded. For ordinary cultivators, if they can stand out in this Tianshui conference, be chosen by the Tianshui Pavilion, and enter the Tianshui Pavilion, it could be considered an immortal fate. Although he was opening a SMUF account, Liu had no intention of playing the game of sex struggle. Everything he did was just a whim. Therefore, Liu had never thought of entering the Tianshui Pavilion. He put away the dragon boat and stepped onto the Immortal Fate Island. There were also many cities on the Immortal Fate Island. At this moment, these cities were filled with people, and there was an endless stream of people. The Tianshui conference was imminent, and countless cultivators flocked to it. Some came to show off their family background, some came to make a name for themselves, and some came to join in the fun. There were also people like Liu who were just strolling around. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. Among them, regional conflicts were a kind of natural conflict. Western Qin barbarians, get out. When Liu wandered to the venue of the Tianshui conference and was looking at the layout of the venue, he suddenly heard two groups of youths shouting and cursing in front of him. Western Qin Prefecture and Tianshui Prefecture were neighbors. It could be said that the western shore of Tianshui Lake was Western Qin Prefecture. Naturally, many Western Qin cultivators would come to the Tianshui conference this time. The temptation of joining an immortal sect and the opportunity to make a name for themselves naturally attracted countless cultivators. For the cultivators of Tianshui Prefecture, these foreign cultivators were naturally competitors, and conflicts were simply unavoidable. Ping, 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 pang. For cultivators, the best way to solve conflicts was to fight. When a chaotic fight broke out, the light of treasures flashed and magic spells whistled. The fight was fierce. Fortunately, the Tianshui conference was imminent, and this place was the territory of the Tianshui Pavilion. One of the criteria for the Tianshui Pavilion to recruit disciples was one of the criteria. Therefore, although this kind of fight was endless, the two sides were very careful and didn't kill each other. Boom! A figure was sent flying backward and fell toward Liu. It's not the Tianshui conference. What's the point of fighting like this? Liu casually waved his hand and caught the young man who was sent flying. He shook his head with a smile. Thank you, brother. Young Master Bai. Zhe, young Master Bai. The young man who was caught by Liu was about to thank him, but he suddenly saw Liu's alternate identity and immediately shouted in surprise. Do you know him? Liu didn't know the background of this young man because the memory he got from Bai Zhe's remnant mind was incomplete. Bai Zhe is here? That's great. That's great. Young Master Bai, help us. The people of Tianshui Prefecture have gone too far. As a result, the group of Western Qin teenagers who had been beaten into a sorry state and had lost all face seemed to have found their backbone. They ran to Liu's side one after another and began to accuse the Celestial Water Mansion of their viciousness with righteous indignation. Liu didn't want to pay attention to this kind of messy argument. Unfortunately, even if he didn't want to pay attention to them, they had to pay attention to him. Bai Zhe, who the hell are you? A group of Tianshui Prefecture cultivators aggressively surrounded Liu. The young cultivator in the lead glanced at Li Yu with disdain. This is not a place for the barbarians of Western Qin. Get out. Well, after hearing this, Li Yu had no choice but to pay attention to it. After all, His Majesty Emperor Yu had never been a kind person. Chapter 753. An ant raised its arm and said to an elephant, "Get lost. Otherwise, I'll beat you to death." In terms of strength, these young Tianshui cultivators were not even ants in front of Li Yu. They could only be regarded as dust. Faced with the provocation of dust, Li Yu, of course, he would take it to heart. I'm not a saint or a Buddha. If you provoke me, I'll definitely retaliate. Of course, if he showed up as the immortal emperor, it would be too inappropriate. Now that he had turned on a Smurf, it was the best way to deal with this situation. Are you provoking me? A chill appeared on Bai Zai's handsome face. He glanced coldly at the Tianshui cultivators in front of him and put his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. Huh, so what if we're provoking you? The Tianshui cultivator in the lead sneered. Cultivators respect strength. The rule here is that whoever has the biggest fist is the reason. You Western Qin cultivators are weak. You deserve to be bullied. Very well, then you deserve to be bullied by me. Bai Zai stood with his hand on his sword. A sharp, cold, and peerless aura soared into the sky. His arrogance soared, and his sword Qi soared into the sky. One strike. I'll only use one strike. With a clang, the long sword was unsheathed, and Bai Zai's cold and arrogant voice spread in all directions. I can wipe out all of you with one strike. You're talking big. Pretentious. Who do you think you are? Bai Zai's arrogant words made the Tianshui cultivators furious. They all cursed him. Clang. The sound of a sword soared into the sky. There was a loud bang in the sky. In an instant, it seemed that the world had changed. The bright and sunny day suddenly turned into a starry night. The stars were bright, and the stars in the sky illuminated the world. The starlight all over the sky illuminated the world with a silver brilliance. There is only endless starlight between heaven and earth, and everything else was overshadowed. This is... Such an earth-shattering commotion naturally alarmed countless cultivators in the area. The Tianshui convention was about to begin. At this moment, countless cultivators had gathered on Immortal Fate Island. In addition to Tianshui's local cultivators, many cultivators from various prefectures around Tianshui also rushed over. At this time, the Tianshui conference had not officially started yet. Although there were many fights and duels everywhere, they were all small skirmishes. For a true expert, they wouldn't care about a fight of this level. However, this sword light, which seemed to be able to change the heavens and the earth, and which revealed the stars in the sky, shocked everyone. There's actually such a person? At this moment, countless people looked in the direction of the sword light. Sword shatters the Milky Way, stars fall like rain. A loud shout resounded through the clouds. The long sword in his hand trembled, and the sword Qi soared into the sky. Boom! The heavens fell, and the earth cracked. The earth quaked, and the mountains shook. After an earth-shattering boom, it seemed as if the starry sky had been shattered by this sword. The sword had cut down all the stars in the sky. At this moment, the stars fell like rain. Boom! 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 Stars fell from the sky one after another. Dragging long streaks of flame, they fell from the sky with a violent rumble. With the power to destroy the heavens and the earth, the falling stars viciously smashed into the ground one by one. They smashed into the Tianshui cultivators. If they were hit by a group of meteors, wouldn't they be reduced to dust? Help! Terrified screams rang out. The Tianshui cultivators were scared silly. In the face of the monstrous power of the falling stars, this group of people had no power to resist. They could only watch in vain as they were drowned by the falling stars. Boom! Countless meteors smashed into the ground with earth-shattering booms. Then everything vanished without a trace. Everything was intact. It was as if the falling stars and the countless stars that had been cut down by the sword were illusions. We're not dead? We're not dead? Ha ha! We're not dead. The Tianshui cultivators, who had been scared silly and were about to close their eyes and wait for death, suddenly found that they were safe and sound. They immediately burst into tears of joy. "You can't resist my sword." With a flick of his finger on the blade, a buzzing sound was heard. Countless starlight hovered around the blade, circulating immortal. Bai Zhe glanced at the Tianshui cultivators, shook his head, and slowly put the sword back into the scabbard. "We won. Young Master Bai is invincible. Young Master Bai is so awesome." The cultivators of the Western Qin cheered and held their heads high. They only felt that all the suffocation they had suffered before had been vented at this moment. Interesting. In a nearby restaurant, several middle-aged cultivators were sitting in a private room, drinking and chatting. Seeing Bai Zhe as sword move, these senior experts in the cultivation world were surprised and praised. The Bai family? A disciple of the Bai family in the Western Qin prefecture? I didn't know there was such a figure in the Bai family. A middle-aged man with a purplish-red complexion and a dignified bearing raised his eyes and glanced in the direction of Bai Zhe. He nodded with a smile and said, "Even I almost misjudged the commotion caused by that sword strike just now. Ha! That illusion just now was really vivid." The others also nodded and laughed. If I didn't know that with the strength of these young men, they couldn't cut down the stars in the sky, no matter what, I would have almost intercepted them. A white-haired old man stroked his beard and smiled. "I'm afraid there will be a lot of young talents in this Tianshui assembly. Bai Zhe of the Western Qin will certainly shine in the coming Tianshui assembly." Bai Zhe became famous after he cut down the stars in the sky with one sword move. Bai Zhe? Good. In this Tianshui assembly, there is finally a figure worthy of my attention. In an inn in the city, a young man was sitting cross-legged on the bed with a sword across his knees. A faint smile appeared on his cold and arrogant face. Swordsmanship or illusion? A young girl wearing a moonlight dress was standing beside a clear spring. The spring beside her was covered by the moonlight, which was shining with silver light. However, there was no moonlight in the sky at the moment. Bai Zhe of the Western Qin? There is such a figure in the Western Qin? A tall and strong man grinned, then continued to chew on the meat and gulp down the wine. "I accidentally became famous." Liu chuckled and didn't care about it all. Bai Zhe, a smurf, was bound to become famous. As long as Liu casually showed a trace of his strength, Bai Zhe's strength would be shocking. It was impossible for him not to become famous. Young Master Bai is awesome. Young Master Bai has greatly boosted the morale of our Western Qin. Come on, come on, come on. Let's celebrate for young Master Bai. A group of Western Qin scholars cheered and clustered around Bai Zhe as they walked into the restaurant. Bai Zhe, he's still alive? Somewhere in the immortal Fate Island, a figure hiding in the dark seemed to be very surprised that Bai Zhe was still alive. No matter how the outside world reacted, Bai Zhe had officially set foot in the South Heaven cultivation world and was bound to stir up a storm. Chapter 754. Bai Zhe, come out. I want to challenge you. After cutting the stars with one sword, Bai Zhe became famous and was known as one of the heroes of Western Qin. His reputation spread out, and the fact that Bai Zhe's attack was just an illusion also spread out. There were no heroes in the world, so he became famous. How dare he compete with the heroes with a mere illusion? Some people who wanted to get lucky and some who wanted to step on others to become famous all had their eyes on Bai Zhe. I can't believe such a troublesome thing happened. Liu opened a smurf account purely for fun. How could he have the patience to deal with this kind of trouble? It seems that if I don't teach them a lesson, this kind of thing will never end. Stepping out of the yard, Liu saw a group of people gathered outside the door. A young cultivator wearing a black suit and holding a silver short spear stood proudly in front. This person should be the so-called challenger. Bai Zhe, you have some courage to fight. The young man with the spear sneered arrogantly. I'm not interested in your name. Liu waved his hand. You are not qualified for me to remember your name. You. The young man with the spear was so angry that his eyes turned green and his face turned purple. He clenched his teeth tightly and was furious. What kind of people come to challenge me? I don't have so much free time to deal with them. He waved his sword and a bit of starlight shone. In front of the rented yard, a sword mark was cut. If you want to challenge me, you have to cross this sword mark first. After saying that, Liu turned and returned to the yard. It should be quiet now. Although the sword mark that Liu had left behind was still at the Grandmaster level, he was still able to play tricks with low-level strength in the hands of Liu. In the Southern Heaven region, the Master Realm was called the Spiritual Realm. The sword was pregnant with the spirit, and the law was living. With one move, heaven and earth responded. This realm was one's own power, which could interfere with the chi of heaven and earth in the outside world. However, the power that Liu set in the sword mark in front of the door was indeed triggering the soul. Senior Colonel Chu's Free Sky Demon reminded me of something that I had forgotten for a long time. 7 Emotions Heart Fire. Back then, when he went to Yifan's world for the first time, he directly emptied all the flames in the fire domain. Among these flames, there was a type of flame that could arouse the 7 emotions and 6 desires, the 7 Emotions Heart Fire. Although the 7 Emotions Heart Fire was very strange, its power was still not considered too high. Liu changed its appearance and integrated it into his swordsmanship. Then, he used it to create a sword mark on the door. Baize, you dare to humiliate me? The spear-wielding youth roared towards the sky, his rage reaching the point of madness. A mere sword mark? Did he think of himself as a powerful being? Draw a circle on the ground? Unable to restrain his anger, the spear-wielding youth angrily rushed towards the sword mark. Then, just as he arrived in front of the sword mark, the spear-wielding youngster's body suddenly trembled. He let out an extremely terrifying scream and turned around to flee in a sorry state. What's going on? This sword scar, is it really that terrifying? The onlookers looked at each other. In such an inexplicable situation, there were naturally people who did not believe in evil. As a result, some cultivators walked out from the crowd, intending to try out just how terrifying this sword scar was. Whoa, some people sobbed, covering their faces in grief as they fled. Ha ha ha. Some people laughed wildly in joy as they left. Some people ran away in fear and panic. There were all kinds of performances, all kinds of poses. The only thing in common was that no one was able to cross this sword scar. A shallow sword scar that was less than 3 inches deep and less than 10 feet long seemed to have been casually drawn by a sword. It was this kind of sword scar that was like a heavenly moat, blocking everyone. No one was able to take half a step forward. A sword scar? No one can break it? Very quickly, the sword scar that Baize had set up at the entrance had already spread throughout the entire Immortal Fate Island. Many people didn't believe that this sword scar was really that miraculous. It was precisely because he didn't believe it that he wanted to show it to you. Thus, there were even more people gathered at the door. As long as you don't disturb me, you can slowly compete with that sword scar. Liu picked up the wine jug and poured a cup of wine. He smiled and took a sip, turning a deaf ear to the hubbub outside. From what I've learned over the past few days, Tinshui Pavilion's great sects and holy lands in the entire Southern Heaven region have a total of 13 sections. 1 sect, 2 sects, 3 sacred mountains, 7 holy lands. These 13 great sects were the top forces in the entire Southern Heaven region. Tinshui Pavilion was one of the 7 holy lands. These 13 great sects have more than one immortal king level existence. They are ranked at the top of all the forces in the Southern Heaven region. For Liu, the only thing he needed to care about was this kind of peak power. As for the other low-level forces, Liu didn't care too much. After all, only these 13 sects would have the qualifications to deal with South Parting Island in the future. Without immortal king level powerhouses, they did not have the right to speak on an equal footing. There's nothing interesting about this Tianshui conference. Liu had the ability to come and watch this kind of gathering of low-level cultivators. If he accidentally let a smurf participate, then so be it. If he continued to struggle, then there was no need. At this time, Liu already had the intention to leave. Wow, How is this possible? Even young Master Like can't pass. How powerful is this sword scar? At this time, there was a sudden uproar outside the door. Listening to those discussions, it was obvious that a person called young Master Like had come to break through the sword scar and was blocked outside. If one's heart is not as strong as iron, how can one step over this sword scar? In this sword scar, Liu used the strength of Bai to leave a sword of mind. Under this sword, everyone had to face themselves. It was easy to kill a thief in the mountain, but difficult to kill a thief in the heart. When talking about others, it was clear and logical. When it came to oneself, they were speechless. Oneself was always the hardest to defeat. Therefore, everyone who stepped into the sword scar had to face their greatest weakness in the depths of their hearts. Some were fear, some were sorrow, some were pain. Young Master Like one of Tianshui's 10 heroes. Even such an outstanding person had failed. This sword scar's name was even more famous. It also alarmed more people. This sword scar was originally a test to challenge Bai. But now, everyone's attention was on the sword scar, and the sword scar was the main challenge. People kept coming forward, and then they were defeated one by one. No one could pass it. No one could. Tianshui's 10 heroes were all defeated. West Qin, East Qi, South Cliff, North Luo, countless outstanding prodigies were defeated by this sword scar. A day later, the sword scar's name spread all over Tianshui, and it was even more famous than the Tianshui conference. A Tianshui pavilion disciple who was dissatisfied with the sword scar came to challenge the sword scar, and after he was defeated, the sword scar's name reached its peak. West Qin's Bai blocked all the outstanding prodigies of the 5 prefectures of Tianshui with a single sword scar. Even a Tianshui pavilion disciple was blocked outside the sword scar. Bai's name shocked the 5 prefectures. Chapter 755. You guys have fun. Liyu's figure flashed, and he left the house. He was too lazy to pay attention to those cultivators outside. He walked to the restaurant in the city. When the cultivators inside saw Liu coming in, they all stood up and saluted him. Greetings, young Master Bai. Seeing Liyu's figure and the peerless demeanor of the heroes of the 5 prefectures with a sword mark, these cultivators were full of excitement. They looked at Liu with eyes full of worship and admiration. It was human nature to worship the strong. Liu smiled and nodded to these people. He found a private room upstairs and ordered some wine and dishes. He planned to leave after tasting Tianshui's specialties. Seventh brother. Just as Liu was tasting Tianshui's specialties alone, a call came from outside the door. Seventh brother, it's me, Bai Yu. Can I come in? Bai Yu? Are you from the Bai family? Liu shook his head with a smile. This kind of smurf account with a serious background naturally had the problem of being related to relatives. Liu was just casually playing with the smurf account by Zhe. He didn't mean to go deeper. However, since he was still using this account, it was inevitable that he would have to deal with the so-called relatives. Come in. Liu answered casually and continued to taste the wine and dishes. At the door, a thin young man walked in with a big smile on his face. Seventh brother, I haven't seen you for a few years. You made a big name for yourself. This time, the scholars of the Western Qin are really proud and elated. Seventh brother is mighty. After entering the door, the young man, named by you, kept praising and flattering him. What's the matter? He was not familiar with this by you at all. Bai Zhe's remnant soul didn't have a complete memory, so he didn't have any impression of this by you at all. It's like this. Bai Yu rubbed his hands and laughed. Seventh brother, now your reputation is like the sun in the sky. It's no problem to be a disciple of Tianshui Pavilion. Don't you have a Tianshui Immortal Writ? You don't even need it anymore, can you? Tianshui Immortal Decree. Liu remembered the treasure that caused the brothers to turn against each other and caused Lu Tianming and Zhang Liqiao to use underhanded means against Bai Zhe. For ordinary cultivators, the token to enter Tianshui Pavilion was a supreme treasure. But in Liyu's eyes, it was nothing. Bai Yu, right? Liu looked up at Bai Yu and smiled. How did you know that I have the Tianshui Immortal Token? From a memories of Bai Zai's remnant soul, Liu discovered that although this Tianshui immortal writ was bestowed by the family, very few people knew about it. But now, Bai knew that Bai Zai had the Tianshui immortal writ. This was very strange. Third, elder brother told me? Is there a problem? Bai was stunned. He had no idea what was going on. So that's how it is. A few thoughts flashed through Li Yu's mind. He remembered that Bai Zai had obtained the Tianshui immortal writ and eventually died. He guessed that there was a conspiracy behind this. They had spread the news that Bai Zai had obtained the Tianshui immortal writ and caused Bai Zai's death by Tianshui immortal writ. This was some bullsh *T internal strife. Take it if you want it. Li took out the Tianshui immortal writ and threw it to Bai Yu. He waved his hand and said, "After you take the Tianshui immortal writ, go directly to Tianshui Pavilion and report it. Don't spread the news. Otherwise, it's hard to say whether you'll still be alive." "Thank you, seventh elder brother." "Thank you, seventh elder brother." Bai Yu took the Tianshui immortal writ and was overjoyed. He repeatedly thanked Li Yu and hurriedly left. Since I've taken Bai Zai's name, I'd better solve the conspiracy behind his death first. He released a thought and scanned with his spirit. He found a Bai family's third brother. With a thought, the thought silently swept through the spirit of the Bai family's third brother and revealed all his memories to Li Yu. It really is him. He was resentful that his family had bestowed the Tianshui immortal writ on Bai Zai and had given him the opportunity to rise to the top. This third brother harbored a grudge and deliberately released the news. Then, Bai Zai, who had been traveling outside to participate in the Tianshui conference, had been killed in a very normal way. "Forget it. I'll avenge you and end the karma." With a flick of his finger, the Bai family's third brother's neck tilted and his spirit was instantly annihilated. He died without a sound. There's an interesting discovery in the memories of the Bai family's third brother's spirit. True Lord Tianluo, the controller of the Luo net and the supreme existence who controlled the order of South Parting Island. His surname was Bai. Haha, what a coincidence. He had randomly found a smuff, and it turned out to be related to an old friend. The Bai family of the Western Qin was actually the descendant of true Lord Tianluo. Although true Lord Tianluo had disappeared for tens of thousands of years and the Bai family had declined, it was still a famous family in the Western Qin. True Lord Tianluo used to be Li Yu's formidable enemy. But now, Li Yu no longer cared about true Lord Tianluo's level. The case of those years has finally come to an end. In those years, true Lord Tianluo and true Lord Lishan had fought until they were half dead and half dead. But they were still fighting and have been fighting for tens of thousands of years. Li Yu had never found the reason from the two spirits and did not know why they hated each other so much. Now, inadvertently, Li Yu found a clue from the spirit of the Bai family's third brother. The Mirage Island? The treasure map left by true Lord Tianluo. Li Yu remembered the last time he had traveled to an island shrouded in fog off the coast of Tiannan. He had also eaten a hallucinogenic plant called the Mirage Flower. Li Yu took a step forward and instantly broke through the void. He crossed an endless distance and arrived at the Mirage Island. At Li Yu's level, he could break through the void and arrive at a place he had been there once. There is indeed a supreme treasure. Looking up at the Mirage Island, Li Yu found something unusual in the depths of the island. He reached out and directly penetrated the void and grabbed a palm-sized mirror from the depths of the ground. It's actually a broken emperor weapon. It was a mirror, a simple and mysterious bronze mirror. Although it was broken, it still exuded an endless hallucinogenic power. It was like the moon in the water. Everything turned into nothingness. When I came here last time, I didn't pay attention to it at all. I didn't expect such a thing to exist. Although the Mirage Mirror had the absolute hallucinogenic power of an emperor weapon, as long as Li Yu was a little bit serious, this thing could not escape his eyes. A broken emperor weapon. This was the highest level of power Li Yu had found in the Origin World so far. The Origin World really does have an immortal emperor. Only an immortal emperor could refine an emperor weapon. Without an immortal emperor, it was naturally impossible for an emperor weapon to appear. So far, Liu had been wandering around the southern heaven region, learning all kinds of information. However, he found that there was no information about the existence of an immortal emperor, also known as a heavenly venerate, in the entire southern heaven region. It was as if such a person did not exist. Now that he had found this broken emperor weapon, he had confirmed the existence of the heavenly venerate. But why did the heavenly venerate not leave any information about him? Chapter 756. Scheming and scheming. In the end, it's still all for naught. Liu looked at the mirage in his hand and shook his head with a sigh. Perfected Lord Tianluo, turns out that you still have a remnant soul hiding here. Reaching out and grabbing, he pulled out a remnant soul from the mirage. This remnant soul was actually the controller of the net back then. A remnant soul of perfected Lord Tianluo. You actually still have a remnant soul that escaped. After the War of the Heavens, all of Tianluo's avatars on South Parting Island were destroyed by me. What did you leave this remnant soul here? Pointing out a finger, spiritual light flashed. This avatar's a perfected Lord Tianluo instantly collapsed. All of the divine soul memories were absorbed into Liu's heart. So that's how it is. This remnant soul of perfected Lord Tianluo in the mirage did not escape from South Parting Island. Instead, it was before perfected Lord Tianluo used the net to incarnate heavenly Tao and controlled South Parting Island. This mirage is the root of everything. From perfected Lord Tianluo's memories, Liu discovered that the reason why perfected Lord Tianluo and perfected Lord Sky-Splitting fought was actually because of this mirage. Perfected Lord Sky-Splitting and perfected Lord Tianluo were old acquaintances. Inadvertently, the two people discovered the secret of Mirage Island and discovered this supreme treasure. The value of an emperor weapon was simply immeasurable. In this era where heavenly venerables were not prominent, an emperor weapon could simply sweep the world. More importantly, the Emperor Tao laws contained in the emperor weapon could be comprehended and guide the direction of one's own advancement. Therefore, the two people began to fight and kill. After the battle, the two people completely fought with true fire, completely fighting to the death. Even if their bodies were shattered and only their remnant souls were left, they still fought. This is the power of an emperor weapon. Even if the Mirage was a broken emperor weapon, its power was also not what perfected Lord Sky-Splitting and perfected Lord Tianluo could withstand. When the two people came into contact with this emperor weapon, they were already unknowingly affected by the Mirage's illusion art, confusing their minds. Fighting to the death, fighting until only their remnant souls were left, they still fought. How pitiful! Back then, the sword light and the net fought until only their souls were left. They fought so hard that they couldn't even remember the reason for their initial battle. They were still fighting. The Mirage Mirror was an arch artifact, and its illusory power was extremely terrifying. Even though both of them were at the Heaven Monarch realm, they couldn't withstand this illusory power and were crippled. Speaking of which, true Lord Tianluo is more skilled. Tianluo, true monarch, was even more cunning. He had prepared a backup plan a long time ago. He split a part of his soul to hide here and seized the opportunity to seize this immortal emperor's weapon. His original body perished together with the Lord of Heaven's splitter. In the end, he was trapped in the South Parting Island and fought for tens of thousands of years. In the end, it was destroyed by Liu, who appeared out of nowhere. If it wasn't for me, Tianluo, immortal, might have made a comeback one day. Over the years, the avatar of Tianluo had been eroded by the illusory power of the Mirage and had almost become one with the Mirage, turning into something similar to an artifact spirit. Once the two were truly fused, true Lord Tianluo would be able to transform into the Emperor weapon, the Mirage Mirror, and return with great power. Unfortunately, he no longer had this opportunity. After destroying the last trace of Tianluo, true monarch's remnant soul, Liu picked up the broken arch artifact, using the illusory power to become an arch. This is somewhat interesting. Reality and illusion were only separated by a single thought. For an immortal emperor, apart from their own reality, everything else could be seen as an illusion. However, the owner of the Mirage Mirror had used the illusory power to become an arch. His path was completely opposite, replacing reality with falsehood. Using my illusory power to replace the entire world. Replacing the entire world. When the false is real, the real is also false. This is a bit interesting. Liu smiled and waved his hand to keep the Mirage Mirror. The heavenly venerables don't appear in the world. What is going on? The original owner of the Mirage Mirror must have been an immortal emperor, but the arch artifact was broken and left outside. Was this immortal emperor still alive? The heavenly venerables of the origin world were divided into two levels, quasi-immortal emperor and immortal emperor. At the level of immortal emperor, they were also called great heavenly venerables. In the current southern heaven region, Liu had been to some places and had come into contact with some people. However, the heavenly venerables were just legends. If I want to know about the heavenly venerables, I can only find the top figures in the southern heaven region. With one step, Liu's figure instantly disappeared from the sky above the Mirage Island. The next moment, he reappeared on an island in Tianshui Lake. I don't care about the Tianshui convention. Looking up at the center of Tianshui Lake, Liu smiled. Tianshui Jinjuan should know something, right? I'd better meet him. His figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. In the center of Tianshui Lake was the Tianshui Pavilion Station. As one of the strongest sect in the southern heaven region, the Tianshui Pavilion Station looked ordinary, just like an ordinary island. The only unusual place was the Tianshui Lake. The blue water surface with a radius of 10 miles had surging waves all the time. The sound of water churning could be heard all the time, and clouds and mist could be seen all the time. In this small body of water, it evolved into various forms of water. It was evolving all the time, never stopping. Reaching the pinnacle of water arts, true Lord Heavenly Water is indeed extraordinary. In this churning body of water, a voice suddenly sounded. In this place where there was no other sound except the sound of water, this sentence seemed very abrupt. Fellow Taoist, you flatter me. The churning water suddenly calmed down. The Tianshui Lake, which had never calmed down, had turned into a calm lake at this moment. The lake was as calm as a mirror, without any waves. And in this mirror-like lake, a young girl wearing a jade-green dress stood gracefully. Her lotus feet tapped lightly, like a lotus flower, standing in the middle of the water. She was Tianshui Jinjuan. Fellow Taoist, what can I do for you for visiting the Tianshui Pavilion? Tianshui Jinjuan looked up at the young man in white in front of him, and his heart shook violently. If he hadn't seen this person with his own eyes, it would have been as if this young man in white didn't exist, as if there was only a breeze and a floating cloud in front of him. Your body is like heaven and earth? Fellow Taoist, you have reached such a realm. Tianshui Jinjuan looked at Liu with a hint of surprise in his eyes, but he quickly concealed it. Liu, Nanli, greets fellow Taoist Tianshui. Liu stood with his hands behind his back and nodded to Tianshui Jinjuan with a smile. I hope fellow Taoist will forgive me for taking the liberty of visiting you today. Nanli? So you're from the overseas immortal island. Tianshui Jinjuan smiled sweetly and bowed gracefully. Tianshui greets Li. He waved his hand, and a pavilion made of clear water appeared in front of the two of them. There were all kinds of sparkling and translucent furniture and furnishings in it. Please, Li. Tianshui Jinjuan gestured to Liu and stepped into the pavilion made of water. I took the liberty of visiting you today because I have something to ask of you. Liu sat down opposite Tianshui Jinjuan and directly explained his purpose of visit. I come from overseas, and I don't know much about inland matters in Tiannan. I want to know if there are any celestial venerables in Tiannan. Celestial venerables? Tianshui Jinjuan was shocked. Fellow Taoist, I've never heard of any celestial venerables. Chapter 757. No celestial venerables exist? Liu was very surprised to hear Tianshui Jinjuan's words. Tianshui Jinjuan was the top figure in Tiannan and had lived for tens of thousands of years. She must have a deep understanding of this world. However, she said that she had never heard of any celestial venerables. Celestial venerables must exist. Not to mention anything else, the owner of the Mirage Mirror must be a celestial venerables. But why did such a person not leave any information in the world and never appear in the world? Even Tianshui Jinjuan had never heard of any celestial venerables. It would be strange if there was no problem. It's not just the Tiannan region that has no celestial venerables. Tianshui Jinjuan picked up the teapot and poured Liu a cup of tea. I once left Tiannan and traveled in Zhongzhou for a period of time. In Zhongzhou, I have never heard of any celestial venerables. In this world, there are no celestial venerables? Liu frowned. He couldn't figure out what the reason was. At the level of the celestial emperor, one already had the power to override the rules of heaven and earth. Such people, why did they live in seclusion? Celestial venerables must exist. It's just that the realm of celestial venerables is too far away from us. We can't understand it, so we can't see the real celestial venerables. In Tianshui Jinjuan's view, the realm of celestial venerables must be very mysterious. Without reaching the realm of celestial venerables, it was impossible to come in contact with people at this level. However, her reason was not valid in Liu's eyes. You are not a celestial venerables. I am a celestial venerables. Even if you can't come in contact with them, at least I should be able to. However, even Liu, a celestial venerables, could not find his own kind in this world. The existence of the Mirage Mirror had proved the existence of celestial venerables. But was there no living celestial venerables? After talking with Tianshui Jinjuan for a while, Liu found that he could not get any more information from her. Sorry for disturbing you today. I will take my leave now. After bidding farewell to Tianshui Jinjuan, Liu left the Tianshui government in an instant. What is the reason for the celestial venerable not appearing in the world? Liu did not believe that the Empyreans were all without desires. More importantly, even if the Empyrean didn't have any desires, he still had disciples and juniors, right? Did these people also live in seclusion without any desires? Currently, the only thing that can prove the existence of the celestial venerate is the Mirage Mirror. It seems like we have to start from this. He took out the Mirage Mirror and held it in his hand once more. When Xiao Chen's soul energy touched the Mirage Mirror, he sensed an aura of the same origin through the immortal Emperor's Tao laws left behind. Liu intended to use this method to find traces of the owner of the Mirage Mirror. Even if an immortal emperor had fallen, it was impossible for him to not leave behind traces in this world, such as his cave. If he could find these, he might be able to discover the reason why the celestial venerable was in seclusion. Following the Tao law aura left behind in the Mirage Mirror, Xiao Chun released his soul energy and sensed the aura of the same origin. At first, the aura was indistinct, as if it did not exist in the world. As Liu continued to move closer and closer to the place where he sensed the aura, he gradually found a clue. He held the Mirage Mirror in his hand and released a trace of power to stimulate the original Tao law in the mirror. An incomparably tyrannical illusory power cleansed the world. Boom! Somewhere in the southern heaven region, in a dilapidated mountain god temple, the illusory power sensed something. Found it! With a step, Liu instantly appeared in this dilapidated mountain god temple. This was an ordinary mountain god temple, which seemed to have been built by ordinary people in the nearby mortal world. There was nothing mystical about it. If the illusory power had not sensed it and connected the aura of the same origin, even with Liu's current strength, he would have been mistaken. It's hidden so well. A celestial venerable's place of seclusion, or cave, was hidden so well, and it was disguised as a mountain god temple in the mortal world. This discovery surprised Liu. Maybe the owner of this Mirage Mirror has some strange temper. Liu did not delve too deeply into it. He drove the mirage mirror and found the entrance to the cave. This person, I'm afraid he has a concealment fetish. Everything is hidden well. From the incense burner of the mountain god temple, the entrance of the cave was opened. The entrance was densely covered with countless layers of aura-concealing talisman arrays, isolation talisman arrays, and concealment talisman arrays. Liu shook his head speechlessly. There are no other protective means. All the talisman arrays are for concealment. Stepping into the cave, in front of him was a small space with a radius of 100 feet. The space was not big, and the furnishings inside were very simple. Except for a futon, there was not even a table. To Liu's surprise, the walls of the entire space were also densely covered with countless concealment runes. Concealment. Concealment. Everything was for concealment. This is very strange. Who would do such a thing to their own immortal's cave unless they were crazy? However, the Celestial Emperor could not go crazy even if he wanted to. The only purpose of concealment is to hide. How could a Celestial Emperor be so frightened? Not only did he not have the courage to fight back, he did not even have any means to fight back. Everything was for concealment, for concealment. What kind of enemy was it? How could a Celestial Emperor be so frightened? This so-called cave was all for concealment. There were no protective measures. From this point, it could be seen that in the heart of this Celestial Emperor, those protective measures were meaningless. In other words, the protective measures of a Celestial Emperor could not stop his enemy at all. All his efforts were for concealment. This is strange. Even a Celestial Emperor who achieved the Tao through illusions was still a Celestial Emperor. Such an eternal existence, such an invincible existence, was actually so frightened. Liu released his spirit and carefully searched the small and simple cave. He wanted to see if he could find any useful information. Here, Liu walked to the front of the futon and stared at the ground in front of the futon for a long time, without saying a word. There was a line of words on the ground. It was messy and illegible. Obviously, the person who carved this line of words was very frightened and terrified at that time. He is about to wake up. Liu's face was grave. He was about to wake up. What kind of existence was this? How could a Celestial Emperor be so frightened? How terrifying was this? Why would a Celestial Emperor be so frightened when he was about to wake up? A dignified Celestial Emperor was so scared that he hid in a corner and shivered just because he was about to wake up? More importantly, apparently, he did not manage to escape in the end. The Mirage Mirror fell on the Mirage Island. So this Celestial Emperor must have died. He is about to wake up? What kind of existence is this? At this moment, Liu felt a sense of urgency in his heart. If he did not figure out what this was, he would not be able to sleep peacefully. To be able to scare a Celestial Emperor to such an extent, how terrifying was he? Chapter 758. There are still huge secrets in the main world. Seeing the Mirage Immortal Emperor scared out of his wits, Liu was shocked. Unfortunately, it was difficult to find information about the existence of the Celestial Venerables. The origin of the so-called him was even more obscure. Is the reason why the Celestial Venerables do not appear in the world because of the existence of this him ? Because there was such a terrifying him, all the Celestial Venerables were so scared that they could only secretly hide in a corner like a turtle, not daring to show its head at all. He is about to wake up. From this sentence, it seemed that this him should be in a state of deep sleep for a long time. However, after he woke up, something terrible would happen, and the Celestial Venerables would be scared out of their wits. I hope that this him is still in a state of deep sleep. Otherwise, wouldn't I, Celestial Venerate, be exposed to the eyes of him? Although he did not know whether this him was good or evil. However, since the Mirage Immortal Emperor was scared out of his wits, Liu naturally would not ignore the threat of this him. I haven't finished exploring the Southern Heaven region, but I found such a terrible crisis. It's really unexpected. At this moment, Liu no longer had the mood to play, and his face had become very dignified. I can't wander around outside. With a flash, Liu returned to the south parting island in an instant. This is my territory. This is my Taoist field. This is my world. Standing on the top of the sacred mountain, he looked at everything in front of him. Looking at the immortal court palace that stretched for thousands of miles. Looking at the hundreds of millions of creatures on the south parting island, comprehending and cultivating together. All of this was built by Li Yu's hands. Everything was Li Yu's painstaking effort. No one was allowed to destroy all of this. Even the existence that made the immortal emperor tremble in fear could not invade his country. No one could. I must speed up my pace. After returning from the King God space, Liu officially completed the 8th world's task. There were still 2 worlds left before the 10 worlds authority task. After completing the privilege mission, the privilege upgrade should bring about even greater changes. At that time, whether the system would be upgraded, whether more functions would be unlocked, and whether there would be greater improvements, were all things worth looking forward to. Of course, the functions of the system were only a part of it. More importantly, every adventure in every world was a form of growth and progress for Li Yu. It didn't matter if that world's martial prowess was high or if that world's resources were abundant. At Li Yu's current level, external objects were no longer his focus. Everything is the rule. Everything is order. Comprehending the laws of heaven and earth of countless worlds and forming his own great Tao of origin, until it returned to its origin, becoming the source of all space and time in the myriad worlds of the heavens. I have to surpass the celestial emperor realm before he wakes up again so that I won't end up like the mirage immortal emperor, although he didn't know when that so-called him would wake up. However, Li Yu believed that he had enough time to grow. Time passed very quickly in the origin world after traversing through the various worlds. However, in this short period of time, Li Yu went from a powerless, ordinary person to the peak of the world. From now on, he would continue to walk until he reached the final destination. It's time to start a new journey. With a step, Li Yu's figure appeared in the immortal mansion. After this new world is opened, it will be the 9th world. Sitting down in the palace, Li Yu directly let the system open the new world. The whistling roulette spun rapidly in front of his eyes, and different worlds flew past on the roulette. Stop. The roulette came to an abrupt stop. In this life, I don't ask for the past, and I don't ask for the afterlife. Looking at the world that the needle pointed to, Li Yu suddenly thought of this sentence. I only ask for a grand and vigorous life, to settle my debts of gratitude and revenge, to defeat the heroes of all races, and to laugh proudly at the 6 paths of gods and demons. So was this world. Thinking of a young man who liked to show his divinity in front of people, Li Yu's face was full of smiles. When I first transmigrated, I pretended to be the Grand Supreme Elderly Lord. After you transmigrated, you also pretended to be the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning. How interesting. However, the water in this world was very deep. The Tao fruit that was born once in an era caused the immortals and gods to set up spies and bury black hands. All the disputes were in the Tao fruit. It controlled all the mysteries of the heavens and the myriad worlds. It was unfathomable, unknown, and unspeakable. It was omnipresent and omnipotent. This was the most mysterious Tao fruit realm in this world. I know very little about Tao fruit. Li Yu's current great Tao of origins had reached his current realm. It could be said that he had walked a smooth path of great Tao. He did not have much understanding of the great Tao in the form of Tao fruit. However, in Li Yu's opinion, the great Tao was connected. Tao fruit and origin should be similar from a certain point of view. Of course, this needed to be verified after entering that world. System, activate teleportation. The light flashed and disappeared, and Li Yu's figure instantly disappeared without a trace. When he appeared again, it was already a different world. The blue sky was clear, and there were no clouds for thousands of miles. A green mountain range that stretched for thousands of miles stood majestically. Among them, one mountain was particularly eye-catching. This mountain towered into the clouds, majestic and majestic. It was called Mount Liantai. Mount Liantai itself was not famous, but there was a temple on Mount Liantai, which made Mount Liantai famous all over the world. This temple was called Shaolin Temple. Hearing this name and seeing this temple, the corner of Liyu's mouth twitched fiercely. The name of Shaolin Temple has really spread throughout the endless dimensions. Even the other world has a pirated Shaolin Temple. Of course, whether Shaolin Temple had a piracy crisis or not, Liu didn't care at all. What he cared about was the child at the entrance of Shaolin Temple. It was a little fresh meat with red lips and white teeth. At this moment, a horse-faced man who seemed to be a servant was explaining something in front of the 12 or 13-year-old child. Second young master, the Marquis was forced to do this. It's better in the temple than at home. Although this temple is far away from the mortal world, Shaolin is still a great martial arts sect. Who knows, you might have the opportunity to condense the golden body of Arhut in the future and transcend the world's suffering. Even if it's difficult to condense the golden body, the 72 ultimate techniques of Shaolin are also amazing. If you can learn a few of them, you will be able to move unhindered in Jianghu in the future. Wouldn't that be great? The horse-faced man kept explaining. However, the target of his explanation, the 12-year-old boy, was at a loss at this moment, and there was a faint trace of horror in his eyes. This is the little Meng who likes to show his divinity in front of the masses. Liu looked at the boy from afar and smiled. You've been tricked by many people, so I won't torture you anymore. Hello, fellow countrymen. Goodbye, fellow countrymen. Liu waved at the boy, and his figure instantly disappeared without a trace. Did someone call me just now? The boy turned his head and looked around, but he didn't see anything unusual. Am I going to waste my youth in a temple? Little Meng looked at the sky with hidden bitterness and followed a monk into the Shaolin Temple. Fate and reincarnation slowly started at this moment. Chapter 759. There is a guy called Dominator of Samsara in 6 realms in this world. After seeing Little Meng in Shaolin Temple, Liu left Shaolin Temple. He did not disturb Little Meng's destiny and let him develop on his own. A few months later, the young disciples of several major sects came to Shaolin Temple to learn from each other. Then, that night, the 6 realms of Samsara opened and took Little Meng and the others into the reincarnation space. This so-called reincarnation space was almost the same thing as the God space. Since there's a reincarnation space here, then I can also take out my God space to play with. After hacking the God space, all the rules of the God space fell into Liyu's hands. On this basis, Liu could make countless God space. Of course, they were all blank God space. To fully configure the God space, countless strengthening exchange resources were needed, as well as countless plot worlds for Samsara tasks. Our big boss Li wouldn't be willing to spend his money on some freaking godlord. Even if I want to make a God space, I can directly use the resources of the reincarnation space. The reincarnation space, opened by the Dominator of Samsara, in 6 realms has all the resources, so I don't need to invest extra. This kind of borrowing a chicken to lay eggs was too easy. So, the new system created in this world is the God space. Liu smiled and simply gave the task of God space to the system host who was about to be fooled. There are a few things that are the key to this trip in this world, and they are also the main goals. The ultimate goal was naturally the Dao fruit. Liu was very interested in the mysterious and inexplicable realm of the Dao fruit. All the mysteries of the heavens and realms were integrated into one's own perception and turned into a fruit that could only be born once in an era. Liu naturally wanted to study this kind of thing carefully. In addition to this Dao fruit, there were countless gods, Buddhas, immortals, and demons hidden in this world. For example, Buddha, the 3 pure ones, and so on. He could foresee that as he transmigrated to more and more worlds in the future, he would have more opportunities to interact with these big shots. If he didn't take advantage of this world to understand these big shots first, it would be ugly if he were to transmigrate to a world with big shots one day and be sent flying with a slap. The dominator of samsara in 6 realms had many cultivation methods of big shots. In the hands of the immortals and the myths, there were also many cultivation methods of immortals and gods. Even if it wasn't complete, Liu would be able to analyze a lot of things. At the very least, it would allow him to have a simple guess about the power of these big shots. As for the most fundamental goal, it was definitely still the laws of heaven and earth. Only all the profound mysteries and all the laws of this world were contained within the Tao fruits. Therefore, the Tao fruit was the inevitable final goal. That's basically the idea. After sorting out his thoughts and making a comprehensive plan for the future, Liu planned to look for the system host. The purpose of this system host is to mingle in the world of samsara, roam Jianghu, and interact with various forces. Through him, I can get in touch with various forces and get in touch with the backup left by the immortals and devils. Apart from that, the system host had no other value to Liu. Of course, if the system host could really achieve the Tao fruits, it would be an unexpected surprise for Liu. Roaming Jianghu, fighting bravely for his ideals, a passionate and hot-blooded young man. Liu raised his eyes and looked towards the northwest of the continent, a smile appearing on his face. Such a candidate, there is a ready-made one. Leisurely striding across thousands of miles of rivers and mountains, across green hills and clear waters, Liu was presented with a vast expanse of yellow sand desert. This is the western region. Looking at the vast desert in front of him, Liu smiled and nodded. There were 2 big empires in the central mainland, the Great Jin in the south and the Great Zhou in the north. Outside the central mainland, there was also a vast expanse of heaven and earth. The western region was such a bloody and chaotic world where demons and devils danced wildly. This was an evil world. Azura Temple, Joyous Temple, demon race Jiu Yuan, and several evil sects gathered and danced wildly. These were the top forces in the world, and ordinary people could not reach them. Therefore, in the eyes of ordinary people, and even in the eyes of ordinary cultivators, the invincible horse gangs that dominated the vast sea were the most powerful forces. Of course, the bandits who were truly invincible all had backers behind them. For example, Evil Blade Zailoaju was the disciple of the Grandmaster, Crying Elder. For example, Ice Snowblade Sin the Miao, who did not get along with Evil Blade, was backed by Azura Temple of the 9 Evil Paths. The person I'm looking for is within the sphere of influence of Ice Snowblade. Stepping into the vast expanse of yellow sand, under the blazing sun, the entire desert was desolate and dead silent, without a trace of life. Smoke rises in the desert. The sun sets in the long river. Looking up at the vast desert in front of him, Liu praised in his heart and turned to look in the northwest direction of the vast sea. The Golden Sand Oasis where the Gu clan fort is located is in that direction. Liu's figure appeared at the edge of Golden Sand Oasis, crossing the endless sea with one step. Although it was called an oasis, it was actually a vast land. The earth was green, the lakes were like mirrors, and the rivers flowed, nourishing this vast land. Countless people lived in Golden Sand Oasis, and there were all kinds of races. Other than the most common sand nation, there were also some Rakshasa demons with 2 horns on their heads and vertical eyes on their eyebrows. It was said that in ancient times, the western region was originally inhabited by the demon race. Later on, the human emperor wielded a sword and conquered the world, driving gods and immortals away and slaying demons and devils. The whole world welcomed the era of the human race's prosperity. These strange-looking people in front of him must be the mixed-blood descendants of the demon race. Liu was not concerned about these demons. The descendants of China are sheltering in the hands of foreign horse gangs. This is a disgrace to our ancestors. After scanning the Golden Sand Oasis, Liu quickly found a bluestone fort built on the side of a cliff. This was the Gu clan fort, a clan from the Central Plains, sheltering in the hands of the horse gang, Wild Ice Blade, Sin the Miao, and serving the horse gang as their subordinates. Although this was all for survival, it was still a great disgrace. I Gu Changqing, am a good man, upright and upright. How can I work with bandits? A 14 or 15-year-old youth in a bluestone gritted his teeth, straightened his neck, and stared at a middle-aged man in front of him, stubbornly raising his head. Shut up. Hearing the word bandits, the middle-aged man's expression changed. Shut up. You speak without thinking. Do you want to kill your whole family? The lives of thousands of people in the Gu clan fort are in the hands of others. How can you be so ignorant? Uncle, I will not work under Sin the Meow. I will not be a horse gang. Never. Gu Changqing stubbornly raised his head. Even if I can't ride a horse in the martial world, I, Gu Changqing, will not work for bandits. Chapter 760. Bastard. The middle-aged man roared and slapped Gu Changqing. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know how to be flexible. You don't know how high the sky is. Snorting heavily, the middle-aged man flicked his sleeve and left in a huff. Was I wrong? Gu Changqing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and got up from the ground. He held his sword and stood straight again. No, I'm not wrong. His spine was as firm as a mountain. He swore to never bow down. If he surrendered to the bandits today, who would he surrender to tomorrow? In martial arts, there is no retreat. If I take a step back today, my martial arts heart will be covered in dust. Therefore, I can't retreat and I won't retreat. What's the point of practicing martial arts if you can't follow your heart? I, Gu Changqing, am proud and indomitable. I will never betray the bandits. Clang, clang. His thoughts were clear, and his thoughts were clear. His chi pierced through the heavens and the earth. The righteous chi rushed to his chest, and the sword at his waist vibrated. This was an unyielding struggle. Not bad. Liu saw this and nodded with a smile. Only a stubborn person like you would be fearless of death and go through hardships to help a stranger like Xiao Ming. Gu Changqing's determination was based on his inner beliefs. I, Gu Changqing, am a hero who upholds justice. I'm not a bandit. Gu Changqing had always been ashamed that his family had turned to the horse gang and worked for them. He had become their accomplice. He was stubborn about justice and chivalry. This proved that he was not willing to work with the bandits. In the original fate, Gu Changqing had stepped forward to help Xiao Ming. However, he had exposed his background. Therefore, the horse gang sent a letter to the Gu family fort. Gu Changqing was abandoned by his family. His parents and relatives were sent to the horse gang as a gift to atone for their sins. His entire family was killed. In grief and sadness, Gu Changqing left his hometown despondently. Young man, good people will be rewarded. Looking at the determined young man in front of him, Liu chuckled. Even if there was no good karma, if I say there will be good karma, then there must be good karma. He stretched out a finger, and a speck of spiritual light appeared on his fingertip. Little Ming is a transmigrator. I turned you into a reborn so that you can catch up with the trend. With a flick of his finger, a speck of light flashed and disappeared. It silently fell into Gu Changqing's mind. Gu Changqing started to feel sleepy. In a daze, Gu Changqing fell into a dream. I'm Gu Changqing. I'm willing to lend you a hand. I was born in the immensity sea, so I'm very familiar with the terrain here. I'll lead the way. Master Zhending, you are a righteous and chivalrous man. I, Gu Changqing, admire you very much. Master Zhending, today you and I will fight side by side and wipe out the bandits. Countless images flashed before his eyes. In these images, Gu Changqing helped the Shaolin monk Zhending fight against the immensity sea bandits. He fought for thousands of miles and finally returned victorious after all the hardships. However, the next moment, his family betrayed him. His parents and relatives were sacrificed. His whole family died tragically. This made Gu Changqing so sad that he felt like he was dead. He left dejectedly and went to the Central Plains, becoming an ordinary armed escort. In the end, during a robbery, he was no match for the bandits and died fighting. Ah! Gu Changqing screamed and woke up with a start. He was sweating profusely. Was that a dream? Why did it feel so real? It was as if that was the future that was happening to him. The future? If that was the future, he would never allow it to happen. He wanted to change everything. Gu Changqing gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. His eyes were filled with coldness. His family betrayed him and died tragically. The bandits were powerful, but there was no way for him to take revenge. In the end, he lived a sad life. He did not want such a future. Clang, the long sword was unsheathed, and the cold light shot into the sky. I will use the sword in my hand to carve out a bright path. I will carve out a new future. His heart was filled with passion. Gu Changqing's spirit was as hot as the sun. His heart was filled with an unyielding spirit. He could not express it without expressing it. He roared into the sky. He was full of vigor. His voice was like a tiger roaring in the forest. It was melodious and cleansing. Many people in the Gu clan fort heard this roar, but they only smiled and shook their heads. A young man's spirit was nothing more than that. There was nothing to be concerned about. However, they did not know that this was the beginning of Gu Changqing's journey to defying the heavens. Why can I see the future? Gu Changqing frowned slightly as he suppressed his excitement. To be able to let him see the future, this was not something an ordinary person could do. Who was it that did this? What was his motive? Just as he was thinking, an ethereal voice suddenly came from the void. It sounded as if it came from the clouds. It also sounded as if it came from the end of time and space. It was ethereal but very real. When I was projecting the future, you took advantage of it. You were able to see some of the future. Vaguely, there seemed to be a white-robed Taoist standing in the void. He smiled and nodded at Gu Changqing. It's fine. The future is unpredictable. You were able to see a corner of the future. It's your opportunity. I won't erase your memory. The white-robed Taoist smiled and waved his hand. Young man, I look forward to more changes from you. In an instant, everything disappeared without a trace. It was as if there was no ethereal voice. There was no white-robed Taoist. It was as if nothing had ever existed. It was as if nothing had happened. In fact, everything was changing. Is this a Dharmakaya-level land immortal performing a spell? Is that why time and space intertwined and allowed me to see the future? Gu Changqing took a deep breath. So, everything happened in the future? In other words, those things in the future all exist? Gu Changqing's body trembled as he thought of the various secret techniques and weapons he saw in the future. If those things are all real, my chance to change my fate is here. Even though he swore to change the future, Gu Changqing knew very well that without enough power, he was just an ant. How could an ant change anyone's fate? In that future, I once brushed shoulders with a supreme treasure. He leaped onto a big tree in the courtyard. He stood on the treetop and looked into the distance. Gu Changqing's heart was burning. In that future, the treasure was always in my hands. However, I didn't discover the true power of the treasure until I died. Gu Changqing's face was bitter. I originally had a chance to reach the peak. Now it's not too late. All right then, the so-called supreme treasure of memories was something that Liu had casually created. How could there be a supreme treasure of the future in this world? This treasure was the opportunity that Liu had given to the host. He had let Gu Changqing discover and search for it himself. Only then would he believe that this opportunity was obtained through his own efforts. Only then would he fully believe in this opportunity. Therefore, the opportunity had been given out. All that was left was for Gu Changqing to obtain it and rise up. Chapter 761. The chance to change my fate is right in front of me. Gu Changqing jumped down from the tree and walked out of the house silently. He wandered aimlessly as if he was wandering the streets. He drank a few glasses of wine at the bar and rode his horse around the stables in the west of the city. When he was tired, he hummed a tune and went home. He passed by a small lake on his way to the Gu fort. The weather was hot, and the alcohol had gotten to his head. Thus, Gu Changqing let loose and dove into the lake, splashing the water as he swam. It was a reasonable thing to do. There was nothing strange about it, and it would not cause any unnecessary suspicion. Of course, no one would think that Gu Changqing was looking for treasure. Yes, he was looking for treasure. According to the memories of the future, 1 year later, I accidentally dived to the bottom of the lake and discovered a strange treasure hidden at the bottom of the lake. Gu Changqing thought back to his future memories and found the location. He took a deep breath and dove into the lake. This lake was part of the Golden Sand Lake. It was the largest water source in the entire Golden Sand Oasis. Although the lake was not big, it was very deep. As he dove into the water, the cool water became colder and heavier. When Gu Changqing stepped on the thick layer of golden sand, he knew he had found the right place. At this moment, they were already 10 feet below the surface of the lake. Even though the lake water was very clear, the bottom of the lake had turned dark. Fortunately, the golden sand at the bottom of the lake was very special. This thick layer of golden sand gave off a faint golden glow at the bottom of the water, causing a trace of light to appear at the bottom of the dark water. Through the light, Gu Changqing saw his target. It was a huge rock at the bottom of the lake. It was not a natural rock. It was a man-made structure. It looked like it was carved out of huge rock. It was a huge stone platform like an altar. In the middle of the stone platform was a stone altar. On the altar, there was an ancient bronze mirror with a radius of 5 inches. The bronze mirror looked normal. There was nothing special about it. It looked like an ordinary bronze mirror. Found it! Gu Changqing was overjoyed when he saw the bronze mirror. He rushed to the altar and grabbed the bronze mirror. Buzz, after the copper mirror entered his hand, it suddenly trembled. Vaguely, there seemed to be a flash of 5-colored light. It's finally in my hands. The opportunity for my rise is finally in my hands. Holding the bronze mirror, Gu Changqing was very excited. Gu Changqing clenched his fists tightly as he recalled the great opportunity he had missed in his future memory. This time I will not miss it. Buzz, the bronze mirror in his hand, vibrated again. This time, the 5-colored brilliance was even more conspicuous. The front of the bronze mirror had already lit up with a faint 5-colored halo. They're here. Here it comes. The real opportunity is coming. Looking at the 5-colored halo, Gu Changqing recalled his memories of the future. He knew that the real opportunity was about to open. Clang! The heavenly sound was vast and mighty, resounding throughout the 9 heavens. The sound of a bell rang in Gu Changqing's head. It was like the sound of the great path of heaven, sweeping away the clouds and illuminating the blue sky. His entire divine soul was crystal clear. Then a bright and pure light lit up. An exquisite and gorgeous square appeared in his divine soul. The square was paved with white jade. It was richly decorated with dragons and phoenixes. It was exceptionally beautiful. The square was surrounded by clouds and shone with light. Specks of light fell like rain. It was like a magnificent celestial palace. Accept my gift and accept my karma. An exchange of equal value. Fair trade. A mighty and majestic voice rang out in the square that was shrouded in immortal clouds. Above the square, a ball of brilliant light lit up the entire square like a bright moon. I am a master of samsara. Join the samsara space and complete the assigned task. You will receive karma points. Karma points can be exchanged for various martial arts manuals, heavenly weapons and relics, elixirs and spiritual medicine, and heavenly treasures. Young man, are you willing to join the samsara space and complete the assigned task to receive my reward? It was like a fairyland. The voice was as high as a Buddha. It was exactly the same as in his memory. Just as I thought. Just as I thought. Gu Changqing was shocked when he saw all this. The scene in front of him must be unimaginably powerful to be able to set up such a heavenly object. In the future, he had experienced the same scene. However, in the future, he had refused to join the samsara space. At that time, Gu Changqing's biggest wish was to escape the fate of being a bandit. He did not want to be a subordinate of a horse gang. He was disgusted with the way of being driven by others and completing tasks. He wanted to escape the fate of being driven by others. How could he be willing to find himself a superior? Therefore, in the future, Gu Changqing had refused. Although the bronze mirror was still in Gu Changqing's hands, it had lost all its magical power and became an ordinary bronze mirror. I want to change my fate. I want to change the future. Thinking of the scene where his family died in the future, Gu Changqing took a deep breath. This is my only chance to change my fate. So, I'm in. Confirmed. Samsara Traveler confirmed. After Gu Changqing confirmed his participation, the white jade square lit up with a bright light. It was like a wave of water rippling through the square. When the light flashed, Gu Changqing was shocked to find himself in the white jade square. Buzz! A screen lit up in front of Gu Changqing. The screen showed Gu Changqing's image and a string of words. Samsara Traveler, Gu Changqing. Age 14 years old. Identity, disciple of the Gu clan fort from the immensity sea of the western region. Cultivation level. Initial success in Qi cultivation. Cultivation method. Gu clan sword technique. Overall strength evaluation. Not up to par. Seeing the words on the screen, Gu Changqing smiled bitterly and shook his head. Among the younger generation of the Gu clan fort, I'm considered an outstanding figure. Compared to the master of Samsara, I'm not up to par. In fact, Gu Changqing knew that his ability was really not up to par. Samsara Traveler Gu Changqing has joined the Samsara space. You've received an initial reward. Do you want to receive it? The master of Samsara's cold voice resounded in the light above his head. There's an initial reward? Hearing the words, initial reward, Gu Changqing was shocked and overjoyed. This is an unexpected surprise. Receive. As soon as he finished speaking, a beam of light descended from the sky. Draw initial reward. Initial reward draw completed. Congratulations, Samsara Traveler. You've received the initial reward, Sigu Sword Technique. Sigu Sword Technique, a sword technique in the Enlightenment period. Resolute, and indomitable. It's known as looking forward, ignoring back, ignoring left, ignoring right. When you draw your sword and look around, all heroes tremble in fear. As the light fell, countless images flowed in his mind. Sigu Sword Technique was firmly imprinted in Gu Changqing's soul. It was as if he had practiced it for countless years, and it had become an instinct of his body. Looking forward, ignoring back, ignoring left, ignoring right. This is a sword technique that puts one's life on the line. This was a sword technique that put one's life on the line at all times. Every move required one to put one's life on the line. Gu Changqing held the sword tightly. I want to change my fate. Isn't this putting my life on the line? Isn't this putting my life on the line at all times? Chapter 762. Gu Changqing has been fooled. He created a fictitious reborn and created the newly created God King, the master of Samsara, that Gu Changqing saw. However, this was not enough. The master of Samsara I created is still an empty shell for the time being. Li looked up at the sky. His gaze pierced through the void and saw the space of 6 paths of Samsara, hidden in the void. You're all playing dirty. You're all playing tricks. You're all solving karma. You're all in such a good position. I can't help but do something. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He reached out, and a ball of invisible light condensed in his hand. Let's connect this space of Samsara I created to the 6 paths of Samsara first. He grabbed the ball of light and waved his hand. The invisible ball of light pierced through the void silently and fell into the 6 paths of Samsara. The shapeless ball of light turned into nothingness and seeped into the 6 paths of reincarnation without anyone noticing. In essence, the space of Samsara Li Yu created was a system. With the experience of hacking the God King, it was easier to just add a link to the 6 paths of Samsara than to hack the God King. In a moment, the space of Samsara created by Li Yu became an extension of the 6 paths of Samsara. The setup of borrowing the chicken to lay eggs is complete. With the resources of the 6 paths of Samsara and the various plot worlds of the 6 paths of Samsara, Li Yu could make Gu Changqing a success without any investment. As for whether Gu Changqing could build his own team of Samsara travelers in the future, it would depend on the demand. This world is actually very interesting. After dealing with these things, Li Yu had some free time. He suddenly thought of the Jianghu of this world and became interested. The feeling of riding a horse and riding a horse, riding a horse, galloping happily, and becoming famous in the Jianghu seemed very interesting. Actually, I can also play the game of young hero in the Jianghu. Before Liu had traveled through time, he also had a dream. He had the feeling of being a chivalrous hero in Jianghu. Now, since there was such a condition, then let's play. Once the thought was formed, there was simply no way to stop it. The karma in this world is very heavy. My real name cannot be spread out no matter what. Otherwise, I would have to spend a lot of effort and time to reduce and seek emptiness to eliminate my own karma. In this world, the three purities, Tathagata, and the others had racked their brains to think of ways to eliminate their karma. They had been busy for countless years, and it was simply unbearable. At Liu's level, his true name already possessed unfathomable power, representing his only true self. If Liu spread his true name in this world, it would be equivalent to imprinting his only true self in this world. That was endless karma entangling one's body, and one would have to expend a great deal of effort to free oneself from it. So, opening a side account and using a sock puppet is the only choice. Liu released his divine sense, and a vast and majestic divine sense swept across the world. He began to search for a suitable avatar in this world. Everything was karma. In this world, even if one opened a side account and used a sock puppet, it was all karma. Even if it's a sock puppet, it must have a foundation and a history. I can't just give it a random name. Otherwise, the karma of the side account will involve me. Therefore, choosing a character that originally existed and attributing all karma to that character would allow one to play happily. Of course, choosing such a character also meant accepting the original karma of this character. It was necessary to choose a suitable role. Otherwise, if one opened a side account, they would have to spend a lot of effort to resolve their karma. In that case, they might as well not play anymore. In the Western region, there are no less than a few hundred small countries. Similarly, there are also many descendants of the Central Plains who wandered to the Western region and formed tribes. For example, the small country in front of him was a small country formed by the descendants of the Central Plains. Although it was called a small country, it could actually be called a tribe. South of the Immensity Sea and north of the Great Snow Mountain, in this vast territory, there were all kinds of small tribes and small countries scattered all over the place. Sanyue Country, or Sanyue Tribe. Liu's figure appeared on top of a towering snow mountain. He raised his head and looked at the dark green plains below. On the plains, there were crisscrossing paths and farmland. A lofty city stood majestically with green tiles and red walls. It was just like the Central Plains. Sanyue Country, by family, a missing youth called Baizé. This was the sock puppet that Liu had specially chosen. This Baizé was the same name as the sock puppet used in the origin world. Even if this sock puppet involved countless karma in the future, even if some almighty person used this sock puppet to calculate the origin of Baizé, it would at most be connected to Baizé. It would never be connected to Liu. This was very safe. Missing is actually dead. Turning his head to look at an ice valley below the snow mountain, Liu stepped forward and instantly appeared in the ice valley. His gaze pierced through the ice, and he saw a youth frozen in the depths of the ice. I yearned to roam the Jianghu and live a happy life. I wanted to roam the Jianghu and make a name for myself. Then, as soon as I stepped out of my house, I was buried by an avalanche. The karma of this sock puppet was very small. It was only roam the Jianghu and make a name for myself. This was very compatible with Liu's actions. There was no need to specially settle the karma. Therefore, this sock puppet was very suitable. I borrow your name and bear your karma. Stretching out his finger, the youth buried in the depths of the ice and snow instantly disintegrated into nothingness. All traces of his death were erased. Waving his hand, he took out the youth's only remnant from the depths of the ice. A sword, a very ordinary long sword. Although it was also forged from refined steel it was only ordinary steel. It could only be considered an ordinary longsword. However, this sword was the carrier of the youth's karma. The karma of roam the Jianghu and make a name for myself was condensed on this sword. I will use this sword to make a name for myself and spread the name of Bai Zhe. This is to settle the karma. Grabbing the youth's sword, a faint halo flashed and disappeared. Li Yu's figure and appearance changed instantly. His entire person became as cold as ice. In the name of Bai Zhe, the Jiang, I'm coming. Taking a step forward, Li Yu's figure disappeared without a trace and left Sanyue country. The sock puppet is ready. However, the martial arts of the sock puppet also need to have a background. Li Yu curled his lips helplessly. Although roaming the Jianghu in this world is quite fun, it's really too troublesome to open a sock puppet. Leaving Sanyue country and going north was the boundless immensity sea. This immensity sea desert was the place where desert bandits and horse gangs appeared. If Li Yu needed the origin of the martial arts, he could start with them. Chapter 763. This was a small oasis. In this desolate and silent desert, even if it was only a small lake, it still brought about vigorous vitality. The green grass, the dense jujube forest, and the occasional gerbil that shuttled back and forth caused this dead land to show some vitality. Rustle! A burst of horse neighing sounded. At the small lake, a group of valiant men and horses were resting. This was a group of burly men. They were all equipped with 3 horses. Their pouches were bulging, filled with dry rations and long arrows. On both sides of the horses' backs, there were sabers, long swords, strong bows, hard crossbows, and other weapons. The leader was a man with green eyes and a yellow beard. This man had a murderous look. In his green eyes, there seemed to be a vicious light like that of a hungry wolf, as if he was ready to bite the enemy in front of him at any time. This was a group of mounted gangsters. In a vast sea, this kind of group was basically all mounted gangsters. Mounted gangsters are indeed ferocious and inhumane. In the jujube forest behind the small lake, a figure shrouded in a gray-yellow cloak raised his eyes to look at the group of mounted gangsters and frowned tightly. Looking from this direction, besides the mounted gangsters, he could also see a few corpses. On the ground beside the small lake, there were 3 corpses lying on the ground. These 3 corpses were 2 men and 1 woman. At first glance, he could tell that they were the herdsmen of the tribe who lived near this small lake. Obviously, they had been killed by the mounted gangsters. So, I can kill with a clear conscience. The figure shrouded in a cloak suddenly stood up and stepped out of the jujube forest. Who's there? Seeing a figure suddenly emerge from the jujube forest, the mounted gangsters were shocked. They grabbed their weapons and stood up angrily. The person who wants your life. A grayish-yellow cloak was rolled up with a swish sound. A youth dressed in white with a grave and stern face leaped up. The long sword at his waist was unsheathed, emitting bits of cold sparks as he rushed towards the mounted gangsters. A little bastard in the chi-nurturing stage? The leader of the mounted gangsters with green eyes and yellow beard raised his head to look at the youth in white. He snorted and waved his hand to the mounted gangsters. Don't dawdle. Quickly get rid of him. No problem, boss. The mounted bandits laughed heartily as they raised their long sabers and surrounded him ferociously. Little brat, come out after you've mastered your skills in your next life. The snow-white, 4-foot-long saber slashed through the air. The shrill sound of tearing through the air was enough to make one's teeth ache. The ice-cold, murderous intent seemed to freeze one's soul. These bandits were not ordinary people. Even the weakest of them had already reached large success in chi cultivation and was about to open their acupoints. In front of such a group of horse bandits, the white-clothed youth's initial chi cultivation was nothing. In the eyes of the mounted gangsters, this little brat could be killed with a single slash. However, things went beyond their expectations. Pooh! Just as the gleaming long blade was about to strike down, the long sword in the youth's hand moved slightly and appeared right in front of the horse bandit's neck. Therefore, with a slash of the saber, the horse bandit, who had shifted his center of gravity forward, bumped into the blade of the sword and pierced through his throat. This situation was out of their expectations. The other mounted gangsters were stunned for a moment before they became furious. Kill him. A few mounted gangsters surrounded the young man and chopped down with their long sabers. Puff, puff, puff. The long sword vibrated as it found the fastest and most direct path in the sky. It pierced through the gaps between the sabers and slashed across the necks of several mounted gangsters. Fresh blood spurted out as the corpses fell to the ground. In an instant, the group of mounted gangsters had fallen under the youth's sword. The only one left was the leader of the mounted gangsters with blue eyes and yellow beard. The leader of the mounted gangsters gripped his long saber with a grave expression as he looked at the white-clothed youth with eyes full of shock. A youth who had only reached small success in chi cultivation had actually killed more than 10 people who were stronger than him in the blink of an eye. This was simply unbelievable. Could this youth be a disciple of some large sect? For example, the Sword of Snow Mountain sect loved to do such chivalrous acts. Who are you? The leader of the mounted gangsters stood upright with his saber in hand, but his heart was filled with anxiety. If this youth was really a disciple of the Sword of Snow Mountain sect, he could not afford to offend such a person. Someone who wants your life. The youth's stern face was expressionless. The long sword in his hand emitted a cold light as it pierced through the air like lightning. Want my life? That will depend on how capable you are. Since he had already made his move, the mounted gangsters did not care about his background. The long saber was like snow, chilling to the bone. The leader of the mounted gangsters roared as he swung his saber down with a ferocious glint in his green eyes. As he swung his saber, an icy chill pervaded the air, causing one to feel as though they had fallen into an ice cellar. The bone-chilling coldness seemed to even freeze one's blood vessels. This was the famous skill of the mounted gangsters, frozen slash. With his eyes and ears opened and 4 acupoints opened, the leader of the mounted gangsters was also a powerful figure in this area. This frozen slash was also a unique skill of the Enlightenment period. As he swung his saber, the icy chill would invade one's mind, causing one's body to unconsciously become sluggish and slow down. As a result, one would die under his saber. Mind interference? Feeling the icy chill, the youth was slightly surprised. However, the long sword in his hand became even faster as lightning. Lightning strikes before covering ears. The sword pierced out like a shooting star, like a thunderbolt in the clear sky. It was sudden and unstoppable. With a puff, the long sword pierced through the leader's throat. Kiki, the mounted gangster leader's face was filled with disbelief. He could not believe that he had died just like that he had died under a casual strike from someone else. He had the ability to open 4 acupoints. How could he be killed by a brat at the initial stage of chi cultivation with a casual strike? How could such a thing happen? He was simply dying with a grievance. For me to personally kill you, this is a blessing that you would not be able to cultivate for several lifetimes. The youth in white revealed a smile on his cold face. A mounted gangster leader who has opened 4 acupoints should have something like a martial arts manual. He turned his head and glanced at the corpse of the mounted gangster leader. With a flick of his long sword, he took the mounted gangster leader's waist pouch. Ice Soul Saber Scripture. He opened the pouch and found a manual inside. He casually flipped through it and found that this manual was a saber skill of the Enlightenment period. It was just right for him. Not bad. I have already obtained the basic martial arts manual for my new disguise. With just a glance, he understood all the contents of this secret manual. By extension, it was a peerless, godly skill. Liu's level, all martial arts, swordsmanship, and supernatural powers were essentially the same. Whether it was saber skills or swordsmanship, they were all the same. The concept of Ice Soul Saber Scripture becoming Ice Soul Saber Scripture did not exist. The saber in the mounted gangster leader's hand is not bad. He reached out and the mounted gangster leader's 4-feet-long saber fell into his hand. The long saber was narrow and sharp. It was bone-chilling. It was a refined weapon. The weapons in this world started from ordinary weapons. There were also refined weapons, precious weapons, and divine weapons. Refined weapons were treasures that could not be bought with money in the Enlightenment period. It's a good opportunity to upgrade that ordinary sword. With a swipe of his hand, the refined weapon-long saber instantly disintegrated into a cold light and merged into the long sword at his waist. Clang! With the sound of the sword, the long sword at his waist emitted a cold light and was officially upgraded to a refined weapon. Now that I have a novice equipment and novice skills, it's time to go out of the novice village and kill monsters. The youth by Zay flipped over and mounted the horse of the mounted gangster leader. He spurred the horse and galloped into the Jianghu. Chapter 764. Half a year had passed. In this half a year, Shaolin Temple had gained a little monk named Zhen Ding. The Immensity Sea had gained a young man who was good at Siga sword arts. Of course, the biggest change was that a young swordsman who specialized in attacking horse gangs and desert bandits had made a name for himself in the Immensity Sea. Glacier Swordsman Bai Zhe was like a cold current blowing from the Great Snow Mountain, making the desert bandits in the Immensity Sea shudder. Dong! Dong! On Mount Liantai, the evening drum and morning bell rang through the sky. Treading on the morning dew, the little monk, Zhen Ding, who was also the time traveler Little Meng, walked on the mountain road with a pair of shifty eyes, carrying 2 large wooden buckets and 2 buckets of water. Senior brother, you said yesterday that if we jump down the cliff, we can find the peerless divine skill. I saw an unfathomable cliff behind a mountain. Let's go jump down one day, shall we? Beside Zhen Ding, there was a little monk who was 1 or 2 years younger than him, also carrying 2 buckets of water and following behind Zhen Ding. Junior brother, things like divine skill manuals should be left to nature and not forced. With great luck, divine skill manuals will naturally fall from the sky. Zhen Ding laughed, carried the 2 buckets, and walked all the way back to the Sundry's yard. The disciples of the major sect came to Shaolin for an exchange. After returning to the Sundry's yard, Little Meng heard from the monks that there were disciples from other sects coming to Shaolin for an exchange today. Little Meng yearned to gallop in Jianghu and walk the world with a sword. However, a handyman disciple like him was not at the same level as a true disciple of the various sects. The only intersection was that, as a handyman disciple, Little Meng needed to clean the rooms of these true disciples of the various sects. When will I also have the chance to roam Jianghu? Lying on the bed, Little Meng was lost in thought for a while as he thought about those true disciples in a trance. The small jade Buddha he wore on his chest gave off a chill. In a daze, the world seemed to have changed. Where is this? In front of him was a square paved with white marble stones. The center was empty, and there were statues of dragons, phoenixes, kuei cows, pishio, and other immortal birds and divine beasts. Little Meng looked up and saw all this. He was stunned and felt like he was in a dream. What is this place? There were other people in the square. Jiang Ji from the Shi Jian Pavilion, Zhang Yuanshan from the Zhenwu sect, and Qing Jing from the Xiantian sect were the true disciples who had come to Shaolin to participate in the exchange. At this moment, they were also very puzzled by this unfamiliar environment and turned their heads to look around. What happened? Little Meng struggled to stand up and looked at everything in front of him in confusion. He did not understand what was going on. He was sleeping in the meditation room. So how did he end up here? Furthermore, he had encountered so many talented true disciples from various sections. Could it be that he was dreaming? Clang! A melodious sound of a bell rang out, causing everyone to look towards the center of the white jade plaza. Welcome to the world of samsara. There are endless dangers here, but you can also get everything you want from here. The grand and cold voice floated along with the sound of the bell, echoing slightly above the square. Who is it? Come out. The sudden voice caused a few elite disciples to be shocked in their hearts. and they shouted loudly before their figures dashed out swiftly and pounced towards the place where the voice sounded out. However, when they rushed there was nothing there. There was not even a shadow of a person. I am the dominator of samsara in the 6 realms. The voice was still ringing out, but all the true disciples tried to find the source of the voice, but they could not find it. It was as if it was everywhere. You will experience one world after another. Complete the tasks I gave you and accumulate karma points. Karma points can be exchanged for everything you want, whether it is peerless kung fu, heavenly weapons, fairy weapons, elixirs to prolong life, exotic materials, and earthly treasures. As long as you have heard of it, it can be found here. What you don't know, it can also be found here. Every time you complete a task, you will return to your own world and wait for the next samsara to open. The introduction of the dominator of samsara in the 6 realms gave little Meng an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Isn't this the infinite flow? Little Meng's mouth was half open. He raised his head and looked around in the sky, trying to find a thing that looked like a big light bulb. The samsara task begins. The cold voice sounded again. The sky suddenly darkened, as if the world had changed again. In front of him was a deep and dark passageway, surrounded by cold stone walls. Boom! A faint green flame lit up on the wall of the passageway and turned into countless words. In order to seize the throne, the owner of the Yin Huang Castle invented the mind-reaving pill and secretly controlled the leaders of all the sections. Hero Ma Liang'an accidentally saw through this plot, so he invited the other 3 masters to break into the Yin Huang Castle together. However, they were careless and were trapped in the castle by the art of traps. Main task: kill the owner of the Yin Huang Castle in 6 hours. Those who complete the task together will be rewarded with 50 karma points. Those who fail the task will be killed together. Side task: rescue the 4 masters trapped in the Yin Huang Castle. Each participant will be rewarded with 10 karma points. If the task fails, there will be no punishment. The green flame burned into rows of words. After a few breaths, the green flame went out and everything disappeared. I think we'd better finish this task first. The words "kill together" made little Meng very nervous. According to his understanding of the Master God, killing people was very easy. Well, this is very strange. We can't underestimate it. The several true disciples also looked serious. They were terrified by this strange 6 paths of samsara and did not dare to be careless. Let's go. Let's see what the master of samsara is up to. They walked along the dark tunnel. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Ha ha ha! Amidst a series of strange cries that sounded like the cries of ghosts and howls of wolves, black shadows drifted over from the air like ghosts. The black shadows floated in the air, as if they were a group of ghosts, pretending to be ghosts. With an angry snort, the true disciples attacked one after another. For a moment, the sword light whistled and the sword chi was everywhere. Ah! A series of miserable shrieks rang out as these specters and ghosts fell from the sky. Their bones and tendons were broken as they fell, and they wailed incessantly. So they're hanging wires. Seeing this, little Meng's eyes were opened. He felt that hanging wires was indeed a magical skill. Even the alien world had developed this skill. This is indeed the Yin Huang Castle. We seem to have come to a very strange place. After interrogating the black-clothed man, they had figured out where they were. This was the Yin Huang Castle mentioned in the task. Side task: rescue the heroes. It can increase our strength and further understand the inside story of this place. Let's go rescue the heroes. After some discussion, they divided into 2 teams. Little Meng, Jiang Zhui, and the others were in one team, and Zhang Yuanshan and the others were in the other team. Little Meng's first samsara task had officially begun. Although she had inherited the secret skill, she was able to withstand the heavy blow, and her dantian was not damaged. However, Jiang Jiwei did not have the strength to move at all. Little monk. His only hope was the little monk Zhending. Although little monk Zhending had low kung fu, he was only a little stronger than ordinary people. However, this Master Chung was also seriously injured. As long as the little monk could hold him back for a while, he might have a chance to survive. Ah! Little Meng raised his long saber high and roared to the sky. Although his legs were trembling and his body was trembling, the courage in his heart did not dissipate. Who doesn't know how to cut people? Little Meng roared crazily as he swung his saber. He swung his saber wildly, as if he had gone mad. Huff! 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 Each strike was faster than the last. Although there was no pattern, it was powerful and heavy. Master Chung was flustered by this chaotic attack. He didn't dare to move forward at all. Upper left diagonally. Although Jiang Jiwei couldn't move, her eyes were sharp. Seeing this, she quickly instructed Little Meng to attack. Although Master Chung was under the influence of the mind-dreaming pill and could only obey the enemy's orders, his intelligence was not damaged at all. Hearing Jiang Jiwei's instructions, Master Chung was startled and quickly dodged. Little Meng's foundation in martial arts was not bad. Although his moves were crude, with Jiang Jiwei's guidance, he would be a great threat. This upper left diagonally move was the key to Master Cheng's change of moves. If he was hit, the consequences would be unimaginable. Master Cheng thought to himself, that was close. He moved his feet and dodged the upper left diagonally attack. However, the snow-white saber light chopped down horizontally. The heavy saber energy ruthlessly chopped at Xiao Chen's chest. Even though Master Cheng tried his best to dodge, his chest was cut open and blood spurted out. What happened to the upper left diagonally move? How did it become a horizontal slash? I'm sorry, I've never learned saber techniques. What do you mean by upper left diagonally? Little Meng grimaced and swung his saber again. You've never learned saber techniques. Master Cheng was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. Ha ha! Jiang Jiwei held her stomach and laughed loudly. This little monk could make a life-and-death battle so happy. He was quite capable. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door of the stone room. A young man in green with a long sword in his left hand knocked on the stone door with his right hand. He smiled and nodded at Jiang Jiwei and Little Meng. Young heroes, do you need help? Young heroes, please help us. Little Meng was chasing after Hero Chang with all his might. Although he was aggressive, he would be killed in one move if he made a mistake. Hearing that there was help, he was overjoyed. Then I'll show you my incompetence. The young man in green took a step forward and unsheathed his sword with a clang. Clang! A ray of sword light shot up to the sky. Absolute, resolute, determined, decisive. It was as if every move was desperate. It was as if he had always been desperate. It was as if he would always be desperate. Focus on the front and ignore the back. Focus on the left and ignore the right. Sigu's sword. A sword pierced through the air. It was a fatal blow. Either you die or I die. This was a swordsmanship that only attacked and had no defense. This was a swordsmanship that never backed down and never compromised. The sword pierced through Master Cheng's skull. Master Cheng's eyes went blank. He fell to the ground and stopped breathing. Phew! It's finally over. Little Meng wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and smiled at the young man in green. Brother, thank you. Shouldn't you call me almsgiver? He was a monk, but he spoke in such a Jianghu way. The young man in green was not used to Little Meng's habitual pranks. This guy doesn't have the self-awareness of a monk at all. Jiang Jiwei also caught her breath. She smiled and nodded at the young man in green. May I know your name? Your swordsmanship is very impressive. I'm Gu Changqing from the Western region. The young man in green smiled and bowed. Looking at the two of you, you must be from Shaolin or Shi Jian Pavilion. You are indeed extraordinary. All right, Gu Changqing was messing around. A reincarnator who was not a reincarnator was messing around in the 6 realms of samsara. Chapter 766. Western Region, Jiang Jiwei and Little Ming looked at each other and nodded. There are people from the western region, River East, and Shaolin. It seems that the dominator of samsara in 6 realms doesn't care about regions. But why didn't Gu Changqing come with us? Little Ming looked at Gu Changqing in confusion, but he didn't want to ask. After all, he didn't know what the rules of the dominator of samsara in 6 realms were. Your mission is to kill the owner of Yin Huang Castle, right? Gu Changqing put away his long sword and smiled at them. My mission is to lead the heroes of Jianghu to attack Yin Huang Castle. It doesn't conflict with your mission, so we can work together. Your mission is different from ours. Little Ming blinked and thought, just as I thought. After thinking for a while, Little Ming realized that Gu Changqing should belong to another team of samsara travelers. Their missions intersected, so they were here. Is this a cooperative mode? There must be a confrontation mode in the future, right? Little Ming guessed and understood more about Gu Changqing's identity. Miss Jiang, I have some healing elixirs. Take one and recover your strength as soon as possible. Gu Changqing took out a jade bottle and threw it to Jiang Jiwei. 100 herb revival elixir? Jiang Jiwei opened the bottle and poured out one elixir. She was shocked when she saw the green color of the elixir, which seemed to contain the vitality of hundreds of herbs. The elixir was normal and very suitable, but it was a specialty of Jiang Jiwei's sect, Shi Jian Pavilion. Now, an outsider took it out so casually? Jiang Jiwei was speechless. Oh, in the samsara space, you can buy any elixir as long as you have karma points. I didn't mean to offend you. Seeing Jiang Jiwei's troubled face, Gu Changqing immediately understood what was going on and hurriedly explained. Thank you for your help, Mr. Gu. Jiang Jiwei also understood the reality. She was helpless against the dominator of samsara in 6 realms, but she knew she couldn't blame Gu Changqing. Jiang Jiwei swallowed the elixir and adjusted her breath for a while. Her meridians were cleared, and Jiang Jiwei recovered about 70% or 80% of her strength. I'll open the door for the Jianghu fellows outside. Please wait for a moment. After exiting the stone gate, Gu Changqing leaped into a tunnel and activated the mechanism to open the underground passage of the Yin Huang Castle. Young Hero Gu, Master Gu, the passageway opened and a group of people from the Jianghu walked in. They all saluted Gu Changqing respectfully. Young Master Gu is so chivalrous. We admire you. Young Hero Gu risked his life to enter the Devil's Den alone. You are truly our role model. As they talked, they walked along the passage and soon arrived at the stone chamber. They saw Jiang Jiwei and Little Ming, as well as the dead Master Cheng on the ground. Ah, is that Hero Cheng? Thieves, did you kill Hero Cheng? A group of martial arts practitioners stared at Jiang Jiwei and Little Ming with righteous indignation. Their murderous aura was so strong that they seemed ready to attack at any moment. Everyone, this is a misunderstanding. At this moment, Gu Changqing hurriedly explained, Everyone, Hero Cheng. Sigh, he's been poisoned by the mind-reaving pill. He's no longer the Hero Cheng of the past. Mind-reaving pill. As soon as this name came out, the group of martial arts practitioners all changed their expressions. How could they not know what the mind-reaving pill was? Hero Cheng. Sigh. The result was obvious. The owner of the Yin Huang Castle is a scourge to the world. We swear to kill him and avenge all of you. Everyone unsheathed their swords and charged toward the Yin Huang Castle with anger. Ah, thief, you're courting death. As they turned around the underground passage, a furious roar came from the front. A young man waved his sword and chased after a white-haired man. Senior Brother Zhang? What happened? This young man was Little Ming's companion, the true disciple of the Zhenwu sect, Zhang Yuanshan. Junior Sister Jiwei, stop that thief. He killed Junior Brother Qing Jing. Seeing the people in front of them, Zhang Yuanshan confirmed Jiang Jiwei's identity and hurriedly called out to her. What? The so-called Junior Brother Qing Jing was his companion, the disciple of the Xiantian sect, Qing Jing. Hearing Zhang Yuanshan's words, Jiang Jiwei and Little Ming were shocked and hurriedly stopped him. Ah, That's Hiroma. The group of martial artists also saw the white-haired man. They suddenly realized that this man was the initiator of this expedition against the In Huang castle, Hiroma Yanghan. Hiroma must have been poisoned by the mind-dreaming pill. Gu Chanqing explained and jumped up. The long sword in his hand was unsheathed, and the dazzling sword light pierced toward the white-haired man's head. Hiroma, sigh. Everyone had already understood the reason. They all pulled out their weapons with grief. Puff! Gu Chanqing pierced his sword. Hiroma, who was running away in a hurry, didn't have time to dodge. He was stabbed in the chest, and blood spurted out. The severe pain seemed to wake Hiroma up. He raised his head and saw the group of martial artists. His eyes were filled with tears. I can't take it anymore. Kill me. Kill me. As you wish. Zhang Yuanshan had been suppressing his anger because of Qing Jing's death. How could he hold it in now? The sword pierced through the air, and the bright sword light pierced through Hiroma's heart. Hiroma's neck tilted, and he died. Everyone, the owner of the In Huang castle, is the culprit. Let's avenge Hiroma. The group of martial artists roared and rushed toward the depths of the In Huang castle. In the central hall, this was a hall that imitated the style of a royal palace. It was the center of the entire In Huang castle. The owner of the In Huang castle was in this hall. When Gu Chanqing led a group of heroes to the central main hall, the majestic doors opened with a loud bang. In the huge hall, a thin middle-aged man with a beautiful beard was sitting on the dragon throne. He was wearing a bright yellow dragon robe. He looked majestic and domineering. A group of men in black knelt below the man in the dragon robe. I've been waiting for you for a long time. The man in the dragon robe raised his head and looked at the entrance of the hall. He looked at the group of martial artists and sneered. Beast slaves, kill them. Roar. A series of beastly roars sounded. The dozens of men in black suddenly stood up. They were all crazy like beasts. Their faces were twisted, their eyes were red, and their muscles were bulging. Their clothes were bulging. They had turned into a group of beasts. Senior brother. That's senior uncle. Master. Seeing the group of men in black, the group of martial artists suddenly screamed in horror and anger. Apparently, there were relatives and old friends among the group of men in black. Roar. However, the group of men in black didn't care about the cries at all. Instead, they roared like beasts. Demon, what did you do to them? The martial artists shouted in grief. How dare you roar at the Emperor Father? The man in the dragon robe stood up slowly and pointed at the men in black. They willingly turned into beasts and led the way for me. Once I've annihilated the rebels, I will protect their descendants and guarantee them eternal glory and wealth. Beast! Lunatic! The martial artists were furious. Give me the antidote, and I'll spare your life. These elixirs are a gift from the heavens. How can there be an antidote? I'm under the command of the heavens and under the sea. How dare you betray the emperor? Die! The owner of the In Huang castle shouted crazily. He commanded the group of beast-like men in black to attack the group of martial artists. These men in black are close to the enlightened aperture's level. A few reincarnators looked at each other and raised their long swords. It's time for the final battle. Everyone, let's fight to the death. They jumped up and sword radiance burst out. A great battle began. Chapter 767. Kill. When the black-robed men attacked, the martial artists would not just sit there and wait for death. They all roared and waved their weapons. In an instant, the whole hall was filled with the sounds of killing. None of you can run away. The man in the dragon robe shouted crazily. He waved his hand, and a foul smell came out of his palm. He attacked the martial artists. Catch the ringleader first. Jiang Jiwei raised her long sword and greeted Zhang Yuanshan. The two of them attacked the man in the dragon robe from the left and the right. We can't get involved in this battle. The battle was extremely fierce. The black-robed men were all in the enlightened aperture's level. Little Meng, Qi Jingyan of the Huanhua Sword sect, and Qi Xia of the Dajiang gang were not strong enough to get involved. The three of them had not enlightened their apertures. In such a fierce battle, they could die if they were not careful. Follow behind me. Gu Changqing sent a black-robed man flying with his sword. He turned around and said to the three of them. At this moment, the whole hall was in a mess. There was no safe place. The weakest black-robed men were in the enlightened apertures level. Under such circumstances, it was safer to follow Gu Changqing. Thank you, young Master Gu. Little Meng and the other two quickly picked up their swords and followed Gu Changqing. They killed their way forward. Twisting tortoise and snake, Zhenwu Taiji's sword. Zhang Yuanshan's sword was as steady as a rock. Even though the owner of Yin Huang Castle had a pair of ferocious green poisonous palms, he could not do anything to Zhang Yuanshan's Zhenwu Taiji sword. Kill! Jiang Jiwei took advantage of every opening and attacked with her sharp sword light. Together with Zhang Yuanshan, they kept the owner of the hidden Emperor Castle in check and were locked in a stalemate. However, the owner of Yin Huang Castle relied on his pair of ferocious iron palms and was much stronger than the two of them. Even though he was restrained by the two of them, he did not show any signs of losing. Brother Zhang, Miss Jiang, I'm coming. The sword light flashed, and the Sigu's sword roared. The power of the sword was extremely terrifying. Every time the sword stabbed, a black-robed man would fall. Along the way, Gu Changqing killed with his sword. Almost no one could stop him. Damn it! Gu Changqing's power increased the pressure on the owner of Yin Huang Castle. With a vicious look in his eyes, the owner of Yin Huang Castle suddenly let out a loud roar. Black smoke rose from his body, and a stinky, poisonous gas spread out. Poison! Zhang Yuanshan and Jiang Jiwei's faces changed when they saw the poisonous smoke. They held their breaths and retreated. At this time, all the black-robed men in the hall suddenly roared, and their bodies also emitted a stinking, poisonous smoke. All of a sudden, the crowd retreated one after another, not daring to provoke them. The owner of Yin Huang Castle had already gained the upper hand. Submit, or all of you will die. Under the influence of the poisonous smoke, Zhang Kuang of the Yin Huang Castle roared furiously, as if he had really become the most powerful person in the world. Damn it! The owner of Yin Huang Castle, who was shrouded in poisonous smoke, was invincible. No one dared to provoke him. This made the faces of the reincarnators turn ugly. You are still thinking the same way. Gu Changqing looked at the reincarnators with a smile and shook his head. So what if the poison is strong? We won't be staying here for long. Clang! Gu Changqing raised his gleaming sword high up in the air. He faced the poisonous smoke and stepped forward without hesitation. This is just a mission. What? Mission? Jiang Jiwei's eyes lit up. Yes, this is just a mission. After we finish the mission, we can go back, right? Clang! Another beam of sword light shot up to the sky. Jiang Jiwei jumped into the air and pierced her sword toward the owner of the Yin Huang Castle, who was covered in poisonous smoke. Anata sword. A bright beam of sword light lit up, as if it was from outer space. What a beautiful beam of sword light! At this moment, everyone in the hall was shocked. They unconsciously raised their heads, and then they saw a beam of sword light. It seemed that there was only one beam of sword light left in the world. Unfortunately, there was more. The moment this bright beam of sword light shot up to the sky, another beam of sword light shot up to the sky. Different from the bright and beautiful beam of sword light before, this one was not beautiful, but filled with killing intent. Mournful, killing intent, dead silence, extinction. This was a sword of destruction. This was a sword of death that could kill all living things. Puff, puff. The two beams of sword light flashed and disappeared almost at the same time. The cold sword edge had penetrated deeply into the owner's head. The owner of Yin Huang Castle was trembling all over. His half-open mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. Only his eyes were filled with endless fear and shock. It seemed that he couldn't believe it. Anata sword, she actually learned Anata sword. Zhang Yuanshan was stunned, and his whole body stiffened. The other sword, what is it? In everyone's eyes, the young man in the green robe was as light as a dragon. When he stabbed with his sword, it was as if he had pierced through time and space, piercing through heaven and earth. The owner of Yin Huang Castle's divine soul had been shattered by the sword chi. He was completely dead. Apart from Gu Changqing's sword, Jiang Jiwei's sword also pierced through the owner of Yin Huang Castle's head. A man and a woman, standing with swords, were like flying immortals. Such a sword technique, such a sword technique. Even a mortal's sword dance could not be better than this. The beam of sword light pierced through the sky. It was like a divine dragon stretching out its claws. It could not be seen, but its power could be felt. At this moment, the hearts and minds of all the heroes in the hall were completely filled with the two sword lights. The bright and dazzling sword light pierced through heaven and earth. Such a miraculous and terrifying sword technique, and they saw two of them at the same time. Young Master Changqing, Gu Changqing, has such a powerful sword technique inheritance? What about the other men and women? Who are they? All the martial artists were shocked and confused. However, what made them even more shocked was that, after the two shocking sword lights, it seemed that the two sword lights had pierced through the heavens and the earth. Suddenly, the sound of the void cracking could be heard in the hall. Boom! There was an explosion of heaven and earth. In the dazzling light, Gu Changqing, Jiang Jiwei, and a few others seemed to have broken through the void. They rushed into the sky and disappeared without a trace. Breaking through the void? All the martial artists were dumbfounded. They're back. Bright light sprinkled down, and endless vitality washed over them. When they returned to the white jade square, everyone was bathed in the light. All their injuries were healed instantly. There were no injuries on their bodies. Where's Gu Changqing? Why don't I see him? Where did his last sword technique come from? After the restoration, Jiang Jiwei landed on the ground. She turned around and looked for Gu Changqing. Obviously, Jiang Jiwei, who loved the 3-foot sword, was very interested in Gu Changqing's last sword technique. Third young master's sword? The fatal 13 swords? Little Meng blinked, and his eyes lit up. He even has these things? Clenching his fists tightly, Little Meng took a deep breath. He knew that this was an opportunity to rise. Chapter 768. I've completed another Samsara mission. Silently, Gu Changqing's figure reappeared in the room of the Gu clan fort. It was still the familiar room in front of him. Everything seemed to be the same, but Gu Changqing knew that everything was different. Now, I'm no longer who I used to be. I'm no longer that powerless young man who was at the mercy of others. He walked to the window and pushed it open. He looked into the distance and saw the center of the golden sand oasis. A cold smile appeared on Gu Changqing's face. Poison Meow, the Ice Blade, a bandit and a barbarian. He's only a 9 apertures cultivator, but he can do whatever he wants. Gu Changqing put his hand on the long sword at his waist. His face was cold. Poison Meow was the ruler of the Golden Sand Oasis. The several 100,000 people of the Golden Sand Oasis were trembling under Cinnamon Meow's tyrannical might, their life and death in his hands. Although he was only a 9 apertures cultivator in a small place like the Golden Sand Oasis, his power was beyond imagination. No one dared to resist. In the future, Gu Changqing saw, he refused to submit and wanted to resist. In the end, he was betrayed by his family. He was suppressed by Sinnu, and his entire family was killed. Why did I train so hard? Gu Changqing stepped out of the room. His aura became more and more condensed, as if he had turned into a dark and bottomless abyss. Why did I join the samsara and fight in the endless world? Step by step, step by step. He was not in a hurry, not too fast, not too slow. He walked toward his goal, toward the center of the Golden Sand Oasis, toward the bloody and terrifying castle. When the sword is in the sword, it cries out for injustice. Gu Changqing stepped out of the house, out of the Gu clan fort, toward the center of the oasis, toward Cinnamon Meow's castle. Changing my fate changing the fate of my family, starts here. In the future, Gu Chongqing saw Sinu was one of the culprits for his entire family's death. Because he helped Shaolin Zhen Ding, also known as Little Meng, he offended the biggest desert bandit in the Immensity Sea, Zailuoju. Evil Sword sent a letter to Golden Sand Oasis. Then, the Gu family and Sin the Miao captured Gu Chongqing's parents and siblings and sent them to Evil Sword, Zailuoju, to vent his anger. I won't let those people from the Gu family off. Sin the Miao cannot be let off. Thinking back to the future, even if his parents and siblings were dead, they would be chopped into minced meat by the cruel desert bandits and fed to the wild dogs. Gu Chongqing's heart hurt. It was painful. If a volcano that had been accumulating lava for a long time could no longer be suppressed. Brat, stop! When Gu Chongqing arrived at the entrance of Sin the Miao's residence, he was stopped by the guards. Who are you? What are you doing here? A group of guards wearing leather armor and carrying swords and spears were standing guard at the entrance of the mansion. A fierce-looking man with a curly beard and hair was holding a battle axe. He shouted angrily at Gu Chongqing. Chongqing? Gu Chongqing? Among the guards, there were also members of the Gu family. A member of the Gu family saw Gu Chongqing and shouted happily, Chongqing, you finally agreed to join us? Are you here to meet the great leader? That's great. You're from the Gu family? Are you here to meet the great leader? You look good. You're a good fighter. Since Gu Chongqing was a member of the Gu family and had come to join them, the guards did not stop him. They led him indirectly. The great leader is inside. Go see him yourself. The man with the giant axe grinned and waved his hand at Gu Chongqing. Go ahead. Brat, perform well. You might be able to make a name for yourself in the future. Chongqing, perform well. The Gu family members and the guards raised their fists and encouraged Gu Chongqing. They were looking forward to Gu Chongqing being recognized by the great leader. Ha! Gu Chongqing laughed coldly in his heart. His hand on the hilt of his sword seemed to tighten. Walking into the mansion, Gu Chongqing saw a small bridge over flowing water. The winding path led to a secluded place. The surroundings were richly ornamented and luxurious. After passing through the passageway, Gu Chongqing came to a luxurious hall. The floor was covered with a thick carpet, and the surrounding walls were covered with curtains. At the top of the hall, there was a golden throne. A man in a brocade robe was half lying on the throne. He had a few beautiful girls in his arms. His eyes were half closed. Under the service of the girls, he drank strong wine and laughed loudly. He was very satisfied. This was Sin the Miao. Sin the Miao, the Ice Snowblade, the ruler of the Golden Sand Oasis, the leader of the Golden Sand Bandits. Brat from the Gu family? You want to join us? Sin the Miao glanced at Gu Chongqing. He didn't know why, but Gu Chongqing's straight figure was a bit of an eyesore. You want to join us? I don't take in useless people. Sin the Miao slammed the wine bottle in his hand on the table and exhaled heavily. Go, bring me 5 heads of the Black Sea Bandits. Originally, the Gu family had already sided with him. It would not be so troublesome for their disciples to join him. Sin the Miao would usually just meet them and accept them as his subordinates. However, when he saw Gu Chongqing, Sin the Miao suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Yes, Sin the Miao understood the reason for his discomfort. That was, this young man called Gu Chongqing did not show any fear or nervousness in front of him. That ramrod straight figure seemed to be provoking him. Kill the Black Sea Bandits? No, there's no need to go through so much trouble. After Sin the Miao arranged a task for him, Gu Chongqing suddenly laughed. Bastard. Whatever I say is the truth. How can you refute me? Gu Chongqing's laughter was too ear-piercing to Sin the Miao. It was too infuriating. You're mistaken about one thing. Gu Chongqing's cold eyes stared at Sin the Miao. A cold smile appeared on his face. The hand on his waist slowly pulled out a long sword. I'm not here to join you. With a clang, the long sword left its sheath. The cold sword radiated a chilling aura. Are you here to challenge me? Sin the Miao was slightly surprised. He threw the wine bottle in his hand and laughed loudly. I haven't encountered such an interesting thing in a long time. Kid, you're quite brave. With a clang, the table in front of Cinna Meow made a soft sound. A 5-foot-long saber jumped out from between the tables. Come on, kid, I'll show you my peerless saber skills. With the saber in hand, Cinna Meow's aura surged like a raging tide. He became valiant and powerful. He no longer looked like a lazy rich man from before. Show me your saber skills? Gu Changqing curled his lips in disdain. Killing you will only take one strike. Clang. A dazzling sword radiance shot into the sky, tearing the sky and piercing through the earth. Mournful, desolate, dead silence, extinction. This was a sword of destruction. This was a sword of death that could extinguish all life and all things in the world. 13 deadly swords. The sword radiance was like a rainbow, piercing through the earth. Under this sword, Cinna Meow's body trembled. It was as if his mind and thoughts had stopped. This was sword intent. The realm after enlightenment was called the exterior. The characteristic of the exterior was to use one's own strength to interfere with the world and change the external environment. This sword's intent of extinction and silence was already able to interfere with others in the external world. Just like Jiang Jiwei's Anata sword, Gu Changqing's sword was already at the exterior level. Poof! The sword radiance broke through the skull. Sure enough, only one strike. Cinna Meow struggled unwillingly and fell to the ground. Chapter 769. Phew! Gu Changqing heaved a long sigh. He felt exhausted and dizzy, as if he was about to collapse. I can only use this move to put my life on the line. He thrust his sword forward, infusing all his willpower and strength into the sword. It shone brightly, but it only lasted for a moment. Luckily, I still have pills. Otherwise, I would be in danger. Gu Changqing took out 100 Herbs revival pill and swallowed it. A surge of vitality flowed through his body. Gu Changqing, who had been drained of energy, finally felt a little better. Cinna Meow is dead. The future has changed. At this moment, Gu Changqing was extremely happy. He had waited for this day. Finally, he had the chance to change his fate. From now on, everything would be different. There would be no broken family, no betrayal. Everything will be different. But this is just the beginning. Cinna Meow, I still need to borrow your head. Gu Changqing looked at Cinna Meow, who was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open. He smiled. I'll use your head to intimidate those who refuse to accept it. My road to greatness begins here. He waved his sword, and the bright light of the sword flashed past the head. He reached out and grabbed Cinna Meow's head. Holding the bloody sword, Gu Changqing stepped out of the hall calmly. Gu Changqing has killed Cinna Meow. Cinna Meow has been killed. Gu Changqing shouted as he stepped out of the hall, holding Cinna Meow's head. Who's talking nonsense? Gu Changqing's roar shocked all the bandits in the mansion. They rushed out of their rooms and rushed towards Gu Changqing. How dare you? How dare you? The first few desert bandits were about to scold him when they saw the head in Gu Changqing's hand. They were shocked. It's really the head of the leader. Did Gu Changqing really kill the leader? This is going to change. Gu Changqing held the head in his hand. The head was still dripping blood. Everyone who saw this scene was horrified. Their faces were drained of all color. However, there were also people who were more flexible. The big leader had died in Gu Changqing's hands. If I could avenge the big leader, would I be able to take over the big leader's position? Gu Changqing must have used some tricks to kill the big leader. He couldn't have done it with his own abilities. Therefore, avenge great leader. The original second master and third master naturally knew how to seize the opportunity to stand out. With a roar, the second master, a yellow-haired, scar-faced man, swung his mace and charged at Gu Changqing fiercely. You're courting death. Gu Changqing snorted when he saw the second master's attack. He swung his sword without hesitation. At this time, he absolutely could not show the slightest bit of fear. He could only be high-profile and intimidating. Sigu's sword style. The second leader was not as powerful as Cinna Meow. He had only opened his eyes and ears. This level of power was nothing in Gu Changqing's eyes. A sword pierced through the air with absolute determination. The ferocious Sigu sword, the desperate Sigu sword, the desperation Sigu sword. This sword style was not something the second master, who had lived like a prince for a long time, could defend against. I haven't fought with my life in a long time. In the past, I also fought with my life. In the past, I also fought with my life. In the past, I was also a desperado. However, but that was no longer the case. The sword light pierced through the air and through the second master's throat. With a clang, the heavy mace fell to the ground. The second master clutched his throat and struggled with difficulty. He staggered and fell to the ground. Ah, second master, Gu Changqing is so powerful. After killing the second master with one sword and seeing the big leader's head in Gu Changqing's hand, the surrounding horse gang members gasped in fear. They all retreated, not daring to make a move. At this moment, Gu Changqing's power was overwhelming and terrifying. From today onwards, I am in charge of this place. After throwing Cinda Miao's head out, Gu Changqing raised his long sword with a cold expression and slowly pointed it at the horse gang in front of him. Do you have any objections? Who agrees? Who opposes? Shouts of questioning were heard all around, but there was complete silence. No one dared to make a sound. Ha ha! Chinger, well done. At this moment, there was a burst of arrogant laughter outside the door. The Gu family head led a group of family members into Cinda Miao's residence, as if he was the owner of the place. You are indeed the Gu family's Qilin. The Gu family head nodded approvingly at Gu Changqing, killing Cinda Miao and eliminating evil. Qing is heroic and unparalleled. Cinda Miao is dead. From today onwards, the Gu family will be in charge of this place. With a wave of his hand, a group of Gu family members clad in armor and holding swords rushed forward and took down all the horse gang members in Cinda Miao's residence. Although these horse gang members were unwilling, but Gu Changqing's terrifying strength was too frightening. If they resisted, they would only die. After a while, the entire residence was in the hands of the Gu family. Qing, I will be in charge here. Go and rest. The Gu family head smiled and waved at Gu Changqing. Then, he took over everything as if it was a matter of course. Puffed. Gu Changqing turned to look at the Gu family head and sneered. Who do you think you are? How dare you make decisions for me? Huh? How dare you? The Gu family head heard Gu Changqing's words and was so angry that his eyebrows jumped. His face turned red. I am a Gu family head. Everyone in the Gu family is under my control. Are you not a member of the Gu family? How dare you disobey the Gu family head's orders? Scram! With a swing of the sword, the blade made a pa sound and heavily hit Patriarch Gu's face. Patriarch Gu staggered, and a deep bloody mark appeared on his face. You have to be clear about one thing. Gu Changqing's face was as cold as ice. He stared at the Gu family head and sneered. Here, I have a final say. The Gu family members' hearts tightened. Under Gu Changqing's power, they did not even dare to breathe loudly. From today onwards, my father is the new Gu family head. Do any of you have any objections? He raised the bloody sword slowly. His cold eyes swept across the Gu family members. They all lowered their heads and did not dare to have any objections. Very good. Gu Changqing nodded. I am not a harsh person. Cinda Miao's property in Jinsha State will be divided equally among the various branches. Other than the main family taking 30%, the rest will not enter the public account. The Gu family head is wise. As soon as Gu Changqing said that, benefits and riches move people's hearts. In an instant, everyone in the Gu family supported him. Hundreds of people responded to his call, and thousands of people obeyed. To me, cultivation is the foundation. Money and wealth are all meaningless. Cinda Miao's property and wealth were meaningless to Gu Changqing. The only useful things were the weapons, elixirs, and martial arts manuals collected by Cinda Miao. These things were Gu Changqing's spoils of war. No one dared to touch them, unless he wanted to die. I can exchange Cinda Meow's collection for karma points again. With these karma points, he could exchange for cultivation time and improve his cultivation again. Chapter 770. Gu Chanqing killed Sinomio with his sword. The Golden Sand Oasis had undergone a tremendous change. However, in the entire Immensity Sea, in the entire western region, the death of Sinomio, the wild ice blade, did not cause any commotion. Everything was quietly changing. Quicksand Town. This was the only way to enter the Immensity Sea from the central region. It was located at the edge of the Immensity Sea and had always been the first stop for many traveling merchants. There was a tavern in Quicksand Town called the First of the Immensity Sea. The tavern was not big, and the taste of the food was so bad that it was hard to swallow. The service was so bad that words could not describe it. However, this tavern was doing very well. It was the only tavern in the entire Quicksand Town. More importantly, the landlady of the First of the Immensity Sea was extremely beautiful. Landlady, why is the wine so bland today? Did you mix it with water? A traveler who seemed to be visiting the First of the Immensity Sea for the first time raised his glass and took a sip. The taste was as bland as water, but was extremely sour. It was simply indescribable. Drink if you want. Otherwise, get out. A beautiful woman wearing a small floral jacket pointed at the traveler and roared angrily with her long, shapely eyebrows raised. Her ferocious aura was hundreds of times fiercer than that of a lion from Hedong. Ha ha ha! The traveler in the tavern burst into laughter. How can Jianyang's wine be mixed with water? That's utter nonsense. Yes, obviously, he had mixed wine in the water. How can you say that it's mixed with water? Mixed wine? Isn't it vinegar? Ha ha! The tavern burst into laughter again. Humph! Chu Jianyang snorted heavily and glanced around the tavern. She roared again. Shut up! After the roar, the tavern fell into a dead silence. No one dared to make sound. Jianyang, make me a pot of tea. At this time, a lazy voice came from upstairs. It seemed to be a man's voice. Yes, master. Hearing this voice, Chu Jianyang, who was as furious as a tiger, immediately lowered her head and looked like a gentle and virtuous woman. Wow, I'm blind. Oh my God, what did I just see? The gentle Chu Jianyang? Chu Jianyang's gentle demeanor frightened the customers in the tavern, and they screamed in panic. Shut up! A furious roar swept through the tavern like a storm. The entire tavern suddenly froze, followed by a long exhalation. That's Chu Jianyang. That's normal. It's just that the person who asked Jianyang to make tea, where did he come from? Chu Jianyang, the mad lion of the vast sea, suddenly turned into a kitten? Chu Jianyang picked up a Yixing clay teapot and carried a tea tray. She walked gracefully up the stairs with a sweet smile on her face. The faint fragrance of tea permeated the air, refreshing the mind. Oh my God, Jianyang actually has such good tea here? Are you kidding me? Isn't Jianyang's tea made from black and moldy tea bricks? There's actually such a green tea. Everyone, there must be something fishy about this. Could it be that Jianyang has a gigolo? Bang! Before they could finish their words, a folding stool fell from the sky and hit them in a panic. Chu Jianyang turned around and glanced at the tavern hall with a sweet smile. Her eyes were as gentle as water. Such behavior actually made the people in the tavern feel a chill in their hearts, and their bodies trembled all over. Master, the tea is ready. Chu Jianyang knocked on the door gently. Her soft voice was like a gust of wind blowing over the surface of the water, causing gentle ripples. Come in. The man in the room replied lazily. Yes. Chu Jianyang answered gently. She gently pushed the door open and walked into the room. A white-robed master. The people who had been watching this scene all stared at the door with their eyes wide open. When Chu Jianyang pushed the door open and walked in, they saw a white-robed master in the room. They just glanced at him and couldn't see him clearly. However, the white-robed master's elegant demeanor was definitely not ordinary. Master, the tea is ready. Chu Jianyang carried the tea tray and came to the white-robed master. She gently put the teacup and teapot on the table. She gently lifted the purple clay teapot and poured tea for the white-robed master. That's enough. Don't put on an act. The white-robed master, who was half lying on the soft couch, casually waved his hand at Chu Junyang. How much do you want to charge for this pot of tea? I'm sincere. Why do you? Chu Junyang wiped her tears with her sleeves as if she had been wronged. She was heartbroken. Oh my God. The white-robed master widened his eyes. You put a lot of pressure on me. This pot of tea, I'm afraid it can't be solved without a few thousand taels of silver. Why do you say that? I'm not a greedy person. Chu Junyang was even more heartbroken. Are you serious? Money can't solve it? Are you thinking about my bag of gemstones? The white-robed master shook his head gloomily. Well, is one gemstone enough? I can't give you more than one fire diamond. I'm sincere. How can a mere fire diamond be comparable to my sincerity? Chu Junyang's slender fingers were like blooming orchids. 5? That's too expensive. I can only give you 2 at most. I'm never fickle-minded. 3 gemstones? I'm not fickle-minded. Damn it. 5 gemstones it is. Hurry up and find out where Zhe Luojiu is for me. The white-robed master threw a cloth bag to Chu Junyang and took a sip of the tea. Good tea. Of course it's good tea. Chu Junyang waved her hand, and the bag of gemstones disappeared instantly. She smiled and said, Don't worry, I'll show you where Zhe Luojiu is in 3 days. That's good. Hee. Evil Blade Zhe Luojiu is an exterior master. I'm looking for someone to sharpen my sword. The white-robed master reached out and touched the cold, long sword at his waist. A smile appeared on his cold face, as if as a hunter who had found his prey. You're invincible. Zhe Luojiu will be killed. Chu Junyang glanced at the long sword at the white-robed master's waist. Her pupils shrank as if even she was frightened. I'll take my leave now. Chu Junyang said goodbye to the young man in white and left the room. Her face was a little dignified. Glacier Swordsman by Zhe. He's a young master who suddenly appeared like a shooting star. At the age of 16, he's already opened 9 apertures. Once his hidden latch is opened and he reaches the oneness of heaven and men, he'll be able to reach the exterior. Chu Junyang's mouth twitched as she recalled the origin of Bai Zhe. Shapeless sword, He Jiu, the number 1 on the ranking list of young masters. He was taught by a Dharmakaya master, but he reached the hidden latch at the age of 20. Bai Zhe, an unorthodox disciple from the Sanyue tribe, actually cultivated faster than Shapeless Sword He Jiu. It'd be strange if you didn't have a problem. Chu Junyang thought of her own organization, the Immortals, the Myths, the Immortals, and Dominator of Samsara in 6 realms. She couldn't help but frown. Glacier Swordsman, what's your background? There was more to it than expected. The college entrance examination was over. There were all kinds of summaries and meetings. It was a mess. It would take a few more days. Around the 20th, it would be finished. They would resume. Sorry. Chapter 771. Evil Blade Zhe Luojiu is at the Crying Ridge. In less than 3 days, Chu Junyang had found out Zhe Luojiu's whereabouts. The news was accurate. However, Bai Zhe, the Glacier Swordsman, was speechless for a long time. Normally, the news of Evil Blade going to the Crying Ridge was not important. The Crying Ridge was the nest of the Crying Elder. Evil Blade Zhe Luojiu was the disciple of the Crying Elder. The only possibility for Xie Dao to go to the Crying Ridge was to visit the Crying Old Man. However, 9 years ago, the Crying Elder was killed by Su Wuming, the master of the sword-washing pavilion. After that sword strike, the sobbing old man disappeared without a trace. It was rumored in Jianghu that the Crying Elder was killed by Su Wuming. Now, there was only one possibility for Evil Blade to go to the Crying Ridge. The Crying Elder is back in Jianghu? Glacier Swordsman Bai Zhe shook his head helplessly and tossed the letter aside when he saw that Evil Sword had gone to the Crying Ridge. He could not find Evil Blade to test his sword for now. For Bai Zhe, the 9 apertures completion and hidden latch condensation realm. Challenging evil Blade Luoju, who was in the first heaven of the exterior, was a decisive battle to seek a breakthrough. If he could find the Crying Elder at the Crying Ridge, he would be able to crush the Crying Elder, who is a grandmaster above the seventh heaven of the exterior. In front of Liu, the Crying Elder, who was in the grandmaster realm, could also be killed with a breath. However, in front of Bai Zhe, the Crying Elder was a peerless master. Looks like I have to wait. According to the following development, Zhen Ding, the monk from Shaolin, followed Xian Ci and Zhen Hui to the Immensity Sea in a month. This led to a battle between Xian Ci and the Crying Elder. Zhen Hui was captured by Zhe Luoju's subordinates. Zhen Ding and Gu Changqing joined forces to save Zhen Hui. Then let's wait a few days and watch the battle between the grandmasters in this world. He picked up the wine pot and poured himself a cup of wine. He tilted his head back and drank in one gulp. Bai Zhe exhaled a breath of wine and leaned on the soft couch, dozing off. On the other hand, Gu Changqing went deep into the world of samsara. There's a Shaolin temple in this world? After Gu Changqing opened his reincarnation and came to this strange world, he was very surprised that there was also a Shaolin temple in this world. The foreign races are invading, the divine land is in chaos, and the world is facing a catastrophe. Duo Yin, the general of North D, led her subordinates, the Golden Wolf Cavalry, with the intention of raiding Shaolin and wiping out the last resistance force in the martial arts world. Gu Changqing put his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist. His face was cold as he gritted his teeth. Barbarians have brought chaos to the divine land. They deserve to die. Gu Changqing was born in the Gu clan fort, but he had been a subordinate of the barbarian horse gang for many years. Gu Changqing could empathize with these barbarians' misdeeds. There are also some traitors in the Jianghu who have sided with the foreign races and wreaked havoc in the Jianghu. These traitors deserve to die as well. Gu Changqing's murderous intent shot straight to his heart. Alone with his sword, Gu Changqing galloped across the Jianghu. Everyone has the right to punish those who forget their ancestors. The cold sword light soared into the sky, and a shrill sword whistle tore through the sky. The upright young man in green robes shocked the world with a single sword strike, causing the world to tremble. Young Master Changqing has slain Protector of the River Guan Haoran. Protector of the River Guan Haoran, one of the top masters in the world. I didn't expect him to betray his tribe and become a dog of the barbarians. Young Master Changqing has eradicated the traitors. How satisfying. This shocking news shocked the world. Suddenly, young Master Changqing, who looked less than 16 years old, was in the limelight. He was known as a peerless genius who would definitely step into the immortal realm in the future. The so-called immortal realm is the exterior realm. Gu Changqing found that in the world of samsara, the exterior masters were the strongest forces in the world. In the martial arts world, there were two people who had stepped into the immortal realm. One was the abbot of Shaolin, Master Xing, and the other was the general of the barbarians, Duo Yin. However, the abbot of Shaolin was old and weak. He was only one breath away from passing away. His physical condition was far worse than that of Duo Yin, the general of the barbarians, who was in the prime of her life. It was because Duo Yin, the general of the barbarians, was invincible and unstoppable. This caused the people in Jianghu to panic. Some traitors and traitors emerged one after another. Duo Yin had 4 innate masters under her command. Protector of River Guan Haoran, 100-faced bookster Kuang Chunwang, white-browed wolf Fu Han, and cosmos juggler Tang Shun. At this moment, Protector of River Guan Haoran had been killed by Gu Changqing. The other 3 famous traitors could not be let go. 100-faced bookster's disguise is unparalleled in the world. I don't even know where he is. Cosmos juggler Tang Shun has always been by Duo Yan's side. It's not easy to make a move. The only target left is White-Browed Wolf. White-Browed Wolf was the name after the betrayal. Before Fu Han betrayed the barbarians, he used to have a title that was admired by the world, White-Browed Hero. A pair of white eyebrows was his distinguishing feature. A golden ring broadsword was world famous. Once a hero, now a wolf. Of course, such a traitor must be killed to appease the world. As the target of the barbarians after the betrayal, white-browed wolf, this scum, gathered in the mountains and forests north of the river. He was a top tyrant. On this day, outside white-browed village, an upright young man in a green robe came with a sword. White-browed wolf, you have forgotten your ancestors and betrayed your country. Everyone has the right to kill you. Fu Han, come quickly and accept your death. The bright long sword was pointed at white-browed village. Gu Chongqing looked up to the sky and roared. This was righteousness. This was the combination of one's thoughts and actions. One's qi was vast and abundant, cleansing the universe. How dare you? How dare you? Gu Chongqing shouted angrily and righteously. The faces of the traitors in the Baimei village burned with anger. The more embarrassed they were, the more vicious they were. These traitors roared with ferocious faces. They waved their weapons and swarmed towards Gu Chongqing. They did not care about the rules of Jianghu and did not care about fighting one-on-one. Indeed, shameless people are invincible in the world. Seeing the traitors swarming out of white-browed village, Gu Chongqing snorted coldly. He raised the long sword in his hand, and the cold light of the sword shone. I just exchanged for a sword-fighting technique. I want to try it out. The newly exchanged sword-fighting technique was not afraid of being surrounded. The strength of these traitors was average. It was suitable for him to test it out. The sword moves are like chess pieces. The sword moves first. Before each move, it was like setting up a chess game. The sword moves were like chess pieces. The sword moves were like chess pieces. In Gu Chongqing's eyes, every enemy, every attack was a chess piece. They were all chess pieces. One by one, one by one. The light of the sword shone like stars, like chess pieces on a chessboard. The sword moves were like chess pieces. Killing people was like playing chess. This was sword-fighting technique. Everything was in the chess game. Everything was in the sword moves. Once you entered the game, life and death were out of your control. Walking leisurely, he casually scattered the light of the sword. The enemies fell to the ground one by one. White-browed wolf, come and accept your death. Gu Chongqing's sword shone brightly. No one could resist him. He killed his way into white-browed village and arrived in front of white-browed wolf. Those who forget their ancestors, I will kill them to appease the world. The dazzling light of the sword soared into the sky. The light of the sword was driven by righteousness. It shone brightly and was strong and upright. This was the Howren sword. Mencius said, I am good at cultivating my righteousness, using righteousness to destroy evil. One sword to shock the world. Chapter 772. A gentleman's sword would rather break than bend. A strong and upright sword. A sword that would rather break than bend. Under the influence of Gu Chongqing's righteousness, this sword seemed to carry the righteousness of heaven and earth. With a stab, the sword intent burst out. A strong and upright sword intent. A sword that would rather break than bend. A passionate and impassioned sword intent. A righteous and awe-inspiring sword intent. Under this sword, the former white-browed hero trembled. All kinds of thoughts came to his mind at once. Fu Han, you are a hero. My son is upright and upright. I am comforted. White-browed hero. White-browed hero. White-browed Fu, a dragon among men, upright and upright, worthy of the name of a hero. In an instant, the past glory, and the past admired by countless people all came to his mind. I once had justice too. When did I fall to this level? For a moment, the white-browed hero was stunned. This was a Howren sword, an exterior-level swordsmanship, using one's own will to interfere with the outside world. It affected people's minds, causing them to lose their minds and spirits. Puff! The cold blade, with a strong and upright sword intent, used righteousness to kill evil, and pierced through the heart. I really deserve to die. Thinking of what he had done after betraying his country and being affected by the Howren's sword, the white-browed hero looked distressed. He looked at the righteous young man in front of him with a complicated expression. When China is in turmoil, there are always heroes who sing songs of sorrow. Unfortunately, I can't fight with you side by side. The white-browed hero let out a long sigh and passed away. A day later, the world was shocked. Master Chongqing, with only a sword, wiped out the white-browed village and killed the white-browed wolf. 2 of the 4 traitors have been eliminated. All the upright people in the world are clapping their hands in joy. A man like Gu Chongqing, one sword to eliminate evil and shock the world. Master Chongqing is our role model. Gu Chongqing's fame was unparalleled in the world. Master Chongqing? Gu Chongqing? A few samsara travelers who suddenly appeared in this world looked at each other when they heard the name Master Chongqing. No way. Did you run into him again? The Shaolin monk Zhending, also known as the time traveler Little Meng, rubbed his bald head, blinked his eyes, and smiled helplessly. Gu Chongqing killed Guan Howren and Fu Han. The 2 of them should be at least 4 apertures or above, right? Gu Chongqing's strength is indeed extraordinary. Jiang Zhiwei touched the long sword at her waist, eager to try. I wonder how strong Gu Chongqing's swordsmanship is. I really want to try it. Our mission is to send a message to Shaolin. Then, they will help the Shaolin Temple resist the barbarians' attack. Judging from Gu Chongqing's actions, his mission should be to get rid of the traitors. It doesn't conflict with us. After analyzing the situation, Zhang Yuanshan glanced at the crowd and said, "This is the Wind Cloud Heights at the foot of the Shaolin Temple. At this moment, heroes are gathering and the wind and clouds are rising. Everyone must be careful." Indeed, Jiang Zhiwei nodded and continued the conversation. These heroes are all mixed up with good people and bad people. There might be a lot of villains among them. Everyone must be careful. Let's finish the mission first and send the list of Shaolin Temple's spies to Shaolin. As they spoke, several reincarnators walked together toward the gate of the Shaolin Temple. It was worth mentioning that Xiao Meng and the other reincarnators, in addition to the last few people, had 2 more newcomers. One of them was a gentle and timid girl in a purple gown. She was called Yu Longzi. The other one was a tall and strong man, the leader of a gang in Jianghu. His name was Xiang Hui. Previously, this group of reincarnators had gone through a lot of hardships and experienced countless attacks from villains before arriving at the Wind Cloud Heights. Especially Xiao Meng, who used the Golden Bell Shield to protect himself and exchanged injuries for injuries. Finally, he won the title of Karma-Severing Buddhist Saber. Xiao Meng, who yearned for a white robe and a frosty sword chi, had been fighting with his enemies in the image of reckless monk all the way. It was a tear-jerking experience. How could there be such scum in Shaolin? The old abbot of Shaolin, Master XNG, was holding the list handed over by Xiao Meng and the others. His skinny hands were trembling slightly, and his gray beard was trembling with anger. Looking at his breathless appearance, it was very worrying. Would he not be able to catch his breath? "Thank you so much, benefactors." Master XNG heaved a long sigh, put his palms together, and bowed to Xiao Meng and the others. Kill! Suddenly, a figure rushed out as fast as a ghost and slashed Master XNG's chest with his palm like a saber. Bastard! His cassock swelled up like a sail. Boom! A violent rebounding force sent the figure flying. Puff! Even so, Master XING was still seriously injured and spat out a mouthful of blood. Xiang Hui? At this time, Xiao Meng and the others were shocked to find that the person who attacked the abbot was their companion, Xiang Hui, a reincarnator. Why did Xiang Hui attack the abbot? Is his mission different from ours? Everyone looked at each other, their hearts filled with doubts. Ha! General Duoyin asked me to send her regards to the abbot. Xiang Hui laughed heartily and rushed out of the hall as fast as a wisp of smoke. 100 Facebook stir. At this moment, everyone knew the identity of Xiang Hui. The real reincarnator Xiang Hui had died long ago. This Xiang Hui was hundred-faced bookster in disguise. Hundred-faced bookster Kuang Chenwang. I've been looking for you for a long time. A cold snort came from outside the hall, and a figure in a green robe floated in. With a clang, he unsheathed his long sword, and the bright sword light shot up to the sky. Mencius said, "A gentleman pursues the Tao and desires to be content. If he is content, he will be at ease. If he is content, he will have deep talent. If he is content, he will take the left and right to meet the right. Therefore, a gentleman pursues to be content." He recited loudly, and his impassioned voice resounded through the sky. Vast and abundant, the wind and clouds surged. This was the righteous energy of heaven and earth. You betrayed your ancestors, betrayed your country, worked for the barbarians, and brought disaster to the common people. Kuang Chenwang, your sins are unforgivable. With a righteous rebuke, a righteous sword aura shot up to the sky, and the sword illuminated the 9 provinces. This sword was brilliant and brilliant. This sword was just and honorable. This was the Howren sword, a sword that represented integrity, justice, and righteousness. Evil could never prevail over good. Howren's sword, Gu Chanqing. Hundred-faced bookster screamed in horror at the sight of this impassioned and righteous sword light. His face turned deathly pale. For traitors, the traitor eradication group was the most terrifying. Gu Chanqing was famous for killing traitors, and no one in the world didn't know him. Defender of Hulua, Guan Howren, was dead because he was a traitor. White-browed hero Fu Han was dead because he was also a traitor. Now, Hundred-faced bookster had to face this sword. Facing this traitor eradication sword. Evil Slayer sword. Hundred-faced bookster never regretted becoming a traitor. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. He never thought that he was wrong. However, the sword aura of Howren's sword did not only evoke remorse. A guilty conscience was also where the sword aura of Howren's sword eroded. Facing this evil Slayer sword, Hundred-faced bookster was terrified. He trembled in fear, and his hands and feet stiffened. Soon, he was no longer afraid. The righteous sword light was vast and irresistible. The sword pierced through his skull, and Hundred-faced bookster was beheaded. Howren Evergreen, Gu Chanqing, you really live up to your name. Seeing Gu Chanqing's figure, the Shaolin monks, including the injured Master Xing, bowed to him together. This guy has become much more powerful. Xiao Meng and the other reincarnated travelers were shocked to see Gu Chanqing. They were all reincarnated travelers, but he was doing too well. Chapter 773. Guard the back of the mountain. After negotiating with the Shaolin Temple, the Samsara travelers got a task of guarding the back of the Shaolin Temple. In fact, the Shaolin Temple had already planned to run away. Master Xing's strength was not as good as the barbarian general Duo Yin. Coupled with the sneak attack of the Hundred-faced bookster, Master Xing was seriously injured and could no longer stop the barbarian general Duo Yin. In this case, keeping the monks of the Shaolin Temple alive and making a comeback in the future is an inevitable choice. However, the heroes of the world gathered in the Shaolin Temple to fight against the invasion of the barbarians. Others were fighting desperately, but you, the master, ran away? This was too unreasonable, wasn't it? Naturally, the escape could only be done secretly. Master Xing stayed to stop Duo Yin, and some core disciples of the Shaolin Temple sneaked away with the inheritance of the temple through the secret passage. This was the plan of the Shaolin Temple. Woo! The bleak sound of the horn was shrill and fierce. Boom! The heavy sound of horse hooves was like the rumbling of thunder. It came from afar like raging waves beating against the shore. Gold Wolf Cavalry. Duo Yin is here. Standing at the top of the mountain, Little Meng and others saw the foot of the mountain below. 300 Gold Wolf Cavalry, wearing steel armor, holding long spears and wearing ghost helmets, swept over like a raging tide. Boom! The man in the lead was 8 feet tall, with muscles all over his body. His chi and blood were mighty like a dragon. This man was the barbarian general, one of the strongest immortal realm masters in the world, barbarian dragon Duo Yin. Duo Yin rode on a black horse and punched at the gate of the Shaolin Temple. Crack! The punch resonated with heaven and earth. The power of the exterior realm could interfere with heaven and earth. Under this punch, thunder and lightning flashed and roared. A dazzling electric light, like a silver thunder dragon, hit the gate of the Shaolin Temple with a boom. Smash! Burst! The towering gate of the Shaolin Temple was smashed into powder by this punch and turned into ruins. Kill! Destroy the Shaolin Temple. Duo Yin waved his hand and led the 300 Gold Wolf cavalry to sweep out like a storm, crushing fiercely. Ah! Blood splattered everywhere as his tendons and bones were broken. The Wulin heroes gathered at Shaolin had no power to resist under Duo Yin's suppression. For a moment, corpses were everywhere and blood flowed like a river. Amitabha, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. A Buddhist chant reverberated like thunder. Dazzling golden light shone. As the Buddhist light shone, the golden light condensed into a huge golden Buddha statue. All forms are not forms. All living beings are not living beings. Amidst the chanting, the golden Buddha statue pressed down with its palm. The giant golden palm blossomed with a brilliant golden light. Buddhist chants resounded, and the world rippled with a golden brilliance. Golden lotuses floated down, and the Buddhist light was vast and mighty, saving all living beings. Formless wisdom. A dignified look appeared on Duo Yan's face. She reached out and grabbed a huge warhammer from the warhorse. With a roar, she smashed the hammer against the giant golden palm. Crack! Endless lightning flashed. Duo Yan's warhammer actually burst with dazzling lightning, as if it was a hammer of Thor. Boom! The thunder hammer and the golden palm violently collided, causing an earth-shattering noise. For a moment, the wind and clouds surged, and the earth shook. The power of the exterior is indeed terrifying. She's just like an immortal. She could manipulate the power of heaven and earth with a simple gesture. The powerful and boundless power was simply beyond imagination. Seeing the battle between the two exterior experts, Little Meng and the others were shocked. They only felt that this power was simply terrifying. Duo Yin is so terrifying. Seeing Duo Yan's power, everyone's faces changed. This samsara task required them to guard Shaolin Temple until the last moment of its destruction. However, Duo Yin was so terrifying that they would die if they touched her. To guard until the last moment, they needed to find a way to delay time. The environment of this Shaolin Temple is exactly the same as the real Shaolin Temple. It's exactly the same. Then, is that secret passage also here? To delay time, Little Meng immediately thought of the secret passage in the back mountain of Shaolin Temple in the main world. Thinking of this, Little Meng quickly led everyone to the secret passage in the back mountain. After searching around a boulder, Little Meng actually found the secret passage. This place is really the same as Shaolin Temple. Little Meng reached out and pressed a button. Little Meng opened the secret passage and opened a corridor. There's a secret passage? What a surprise. At this moment, a chuckle sounded in the woods of the back mountain. A young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes slowly walked out. He smiled and cupped one hand in the other before his chest. I'm Tang Shun, nicknamed Universe Juggler. I'm here to send you to see the Buddha of Western Heaven, Namo Amitabha. Tang Shun, one of the 4 traders in the world, Tang Shun, Universe Juggler, was famous in Jianghu for his hidden weapon skills. At this moment, Tang Shun was holding a metal cylinder in his hand. Vaguely, a touch of blue light came out of the hole in the metal cylinder. Pearflower storm needles. Seeing this metal cylinder, everyone's face was very solemn. Everyone had seen this famous hidden weapon in the exchange of the dominator of Samsara in 6 realms. torrential pear blossom needles, one of the most poisonous hidden weapons. Upon contact with blood, one would die. Tang Shun. I've been looking for you for a long time. With a clang, a young man in a green robe stepped out of the cliff slowly with a long sword in his hand. His figure was like a dragon floating down. Gu Changqing? General Duo Yin has already attacked Shaolin. You still dare to stay here? How dare you? Tang Shun turned his head to look at Gu Changqing. He turned the pear-flower storm needles in his hand and pointed it at Gu Changqing. Unata sword. The moment Tang Shun turned his head, a sharp sword light shot up to the sky. It was dazzling, like a meteor from outer space. The sword light came as fast as lightning and as fierce as thunder. One of the 9 killing moves of the Taishang sword scripture. Heaven Sword, Su Wuming's famous unique skill. The peerless swordsmanship of the exterior level. It shone brilliantly here. Tang Shun's attention was attracted by Gu Changqing. He underestimated Jiang Jiwei and the others too much. He was caught off guard and was pierced by Jiang Jiwei's sword. I didn't say I was the only one who wanted to kill you. Gu Changqing smiled and shook his head. You traitor. It's your honor to die under the Unata sword. Gu Changqing, you haven't left yet. Everyone was surprised to see Gu Changqing. Was Gu Changqing's mission also to stay until the end? My mission, Gu Changqing pointed at the open cave. My mission is related to this place. I couldn't find the so-called secret passage. Fortunately, you guys are here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to find this place. Your mission is related to this secret passage. Little Meng was stunned. The secret passage was Shaolin's secret. Why would Gu Changqing's mission be related to it? Stop dawdling. Quickly hide in the secret passage. If Duo Yin comes, none of us can stop her. Jiang Jiwei called out and stepped into the secret passage. Ananda Buddhist commandment blade, the secret of Shaolin Abbot Kongwen. Why would such a mission from the main world be placed here? Gu Changqing followed everyone into the secret passage. He was confused about his samsara mission. He must be at a loss, because wasn't his samsara mission randomly made up by Li Yu? Chapter 774. Boom! A violent roar shook heaven and earth. The entire Shaolin Temple was in ruins. The collapsed piles of wood were ignited by the thunder fire and were burning. The heavy rain poured on the flames, causing thick smoke to billow out. Between the lightning and thunder, 2 figures whistled through the air. The 2 figures, one chasing and one fleeing, were as fast as birds, rushing all the way. The figure in front was thin and withered, surrounded by a little Buddha's aura. Following closely behind, the figure that chased after him had lightning flashing all over his body and wind swirling around him, making him look like a demonic god that could destroy the world. Cough! Dark clouds gathered and the starlight was obscured. In the dim Buddha's aura, Grandmaster Xing stopped in front of a glazed pagoda. He held the pagoda and coughed violently, but a faint smile appeared on his face. Glazed pagoda, is this the place you chose for yourself to be buried? Duo Yin stood in front of the cliff, looking up at Grandmaster Xing beside the pagoda with a sneer on her face. In the battle just now, Duo Yin had the upper hand, but he was not injured. On the left side of Duo Yin's chest, her clothes were torn, and there was a clear handprint, deeply sunken, as if it was cast in gold. However, Grandmaster Xing was even more miserable. In Grandmaster Xing's chest, there was a huge hole, as if his body was punched through by a punch. Benefactor, this is old monk's place of nirvana, and also the place of benefactor's salvation. Grandmaster Xing had a faint smile on his face. His voice was ethereal and peaceful. He raised his right hand and made a flower-picking gesture. Everything is like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew, like lightning. The Zen voice was ethereal, like thunder. The glazed pagoda beside Grandmaster Xing suddenly burst out with endless Buddha's aura. The Sarairas were like brilliant stars, shining brightly, turning the world into a sea of Buddha's aura. Amitabha. In the sky full of Buddha's aura, figures appeared one after another, as if they were arhats, vajra, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. They all issued a solemn and ethereal Zen voice, smiling while holding a flower, pointing out a finger, exterminating all life. Flower pinching finger. Duo Yan's face was extremely dignified. Lightning flashed all over her body, and the thunder hammer seemed to smash the world. Boom! An earth-shattering battle unfolded here. Too terrifying. A group of reincarnators was hiding in the secret passage. Through the cracks in the stone wall, they saw the earth-shattering scene outside and were horrified. The exterior had drawn upon the force of heaven and earth. Such power was akin to that of a god or a demon. It was unstoppable. Stop looking. The spiritual sense of an expert of the exterior is very sharp. If you keep looking, you'll be discovered. Gu Changqing reminded him and walked deeper into the secret passage. This was a passageway that was about 10 feet wide. The rocks above his head were uneven, and the stone walls to his left and right were rough and undulating, covered in moss. It seemed that no one had come here for a long time. This place, what kind of secret does it have? The fire flickered, and under the dim yellow light, the rough, secret passage seemed even darker, making people feel an indescribable sense of dread. This place, I wonder if it's really related to the Shaolin Temple. The group arrived at a plain underground space. Xiaoming looked around in confusion. I'm from Shaolin Temple. Over there's also a similar secret passage. Then let's go ahead and take a look. Gu Changqing smiled. My task is related to this place, so I have to go ahead and investigate. No one knows if there's danger ahead. If you want to go with me, then come. Gu Changqing said to the group, raised the torch, and went deeper into the underground passage. Since this place is related to the Shaolin Temple, we won't go. The other samsara travelers did not want to get involved with the secrets of the sect, but it had nothing to do with their own task. For the sake of Xiaoming, the monk Zhen Ding of Shaolin, the other samsara travelers did not want to get involved with the secrets of the Shaolin Temple. I'd better go and take a look. Xiaoming also had some suspicions about the secret passage in the back mountain of the Shaolin Temple, so he planned to go and find out more. Xiaoming followed Gu Changqing all the way, going deeper and deeper into the underground passage. The passage seemed endless, and after walking for a long time in the darkness, there were some changes in the passage ahead. They seemed to have reached the end of the passage. The surrounding mountain walls formed a semicircle, forming a place that looked like a stone room. In the middle of the stone room was a tattered futon, a stone bed, and a stone table. Is this a place where a master lives in seclusion? Xiaoming was surprised, and he became curious about the stone room. According to some rules, this should be a place of opportunity and treasure, right? The place where Ananda used to practice in seclusion. Gu Changqing looked indifferent and pointed at the stone wall next to the futon. The light of the fire shone on the stone wall, and a few lines of words appeared vaguely. Ananda? The Venerable in front of the Buddha? Does such a mythical figure really exist? Xiaoming looked in the direction Gu Changqing was pointing and saw the words on the stone wall. It was Sanskrit. Xiaoming was a monk, so he was familiar with Sanskrit. With the help of the fire, he quickly recognized the words. If you don't enter the world of mortals, experience the sea of suffering, and don't recite the commandments, how can you know the true meaning of the rules? How can you see through the illusions of the world? How can you see your own Buddha nature? How can you prove the emptiness? In addition to these words, there was a signature at the bottom. It's really Ananda the Venerable? Meng Qi was so surprised that he could not close his mouth. The Venerable in front of the Buddha, a mythical figure, actually existed? It was not a myth. Ananda, the Sanskrit name, was written with dragon and snake strokes. There was a hint of sharpness and tranquility hidden in it, as if it was endlessly mysterious. Here, in a trance, Xiaoming seemed to be enlightened. He walked to the stone wall and reached out to touch the Sanskrit name, Ananda. If I were you, I wouldn't be so reckless. Gu Changqing shook his head at Xiao Meng, indicating that he should not touch it. However, Xiao Meng seemed to have lost his mind. The moment Gu Changqing reminded him, his hand had already touched the name Ananda. Clang! The sound of knife shook the world. Xiao Meng only saw a flash of knife light in front of his eyes. It was like a cold moon in the sky, like frost. It came suddenly, but it was natural and calm. It was as if the knife light was the law of the world. All kinds of obstacles were cut in half with one slash. Ah! Little Meng let out a cry of alarm as he realized that the blade of light was slashing into his body, slashing into his heart. The boundless world of mortals entered his heart. The living suffered, the old suffered, the sick suffered, and the dead suffered. The knife light evolved into infinite mysteries and finally merged into one knife to break the shackles of the body. In the light, Meng Qi vaguely saw a monk. He could not tell whether he was old or young, beautiful or ugly. He could only vaguely feel the bitterness and determination on his face. Peace split, mortal dust fall, lead the external devil, burn the fire of karma, cut off the cause and effect. This is Ananda, oath-breaking blade. The world of mortals was full of sorrow and suffering. That knife was deeply imprinted in Xiao Meng's mind. At the same time, the prompt of the dominator of samsara in 6 realms sounded. Receive the gist of trueness impartation of Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship. Comprehended the first move of Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship, peace split. Xiao Meng's mouth closed after a long time. Sure enough, this is really a lucky encounter. Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship belonged to the peak of the exterior level. When it was perfected, it could touch the rules of heaven and earth. This bladesmanship was a secret manual inheritance in Shaolin Temple. Xiao Meng was pleasantly surprised by this lucky encounter. The exchange price of Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship with the dominator of samsara in 6 realms was 9,000 karma points. The primary instruction was 3,000 karma points, and each style was 1,200 karma points. This lucky encounter was equivalent to 9,000 karma points. As long as he continued to deepen his understanding, it would not be difficult to completely master Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship. In order to truly exert the power of Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship, he needed to step into the exterior level and trigger changes in heaven and earth. However, if he could master some gist of trueness, he would have a trump card to explode in the battle of the Enlightenment period. He would have a real trump card, just like Jiang Jiwei's Enata sword and Gu Changqing's Howrun sword. Xiao Meng had been coveting their unique skills for a long time. Got a lucky encounter? Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship? Gu Changqing saw Xiao Meng's expression and understood. He nodded with a smile and reached out to press the name Ananda on the stone wall. I see. Gu Changqing also felt the gist of trueness and the 5 bladesmanship moves. He let out a long sigh and turned to look at Xiao Meng. His expression was very serious. Is there a problem? Xiao Meng felt uncomfortable under Gu Changqing's gaze. This bladesmanship has a big problem. Gu Changqing discovered the deep malice in Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship from the dominator of samsara's hint. Breaking the precepts, severing karma, breaking the precepts again, severing karma again. In the end, all feelings and desires would be severed by this bladesmanship. At that time, would he still be himself? You mean, at the end of this bladesmanship, I'll either become a heartless saint or a bald thief who ignores all worldly desires. Taking a deep breath, little Meng shuddered. Although he was from Shaolin and had his head shaved, Xiao Meng had never thought of being a monk for the rest of his life. He had long been prepared to return to the secular world. Now, this bladesmanship had the danger of being a bald thief for the rest of his life. Xiao Meng was very sick of it. Anyway, be careful. Don't get too addicted to it. Find your own path and transcend it. Only then will you not be affected by the bladesmanship. Gu Changqing had also comprehended this bladesmanship, but at most he had borrowed the bladesmanship from it and integrated it into his own swordsmanship. He had never planned to practice Ananda, oath-breaking bladesmanship. Brother Gu, you're right. Xiaoming agreed with Gu Changqing. He looked up and scanned the stone room. In a corner, he found something that looked like a stone door. It looked like a door-shaped carving on the stone wall. There were a few words beside the door-shaped carving. Do not enter this door, righteous and benevolent. As he read this sentence, Xiaoming subconsciously reached out his right hand and gently pressed on the stone door. He wanted to feel if he could open it. As soon as his hand touched it, endless coldness and terror rushed into his heart like a raging tide. A sea of blood filled the sky. Corpses were everywhere. Evil spirits and demons were everywhere. It was like hell. Boom! Monstrous black flames swept out, burning everything and destroying all life. Xiaoming exclaimed. His face turned pale, and he hurriedly backed away from the stone door. The illusion in front of him slowly dissipated. I say, you've got guts. You dare to touch anything. It's not easy for you to survive until now. Gu Changqing turned and looked at Xiaoming, speechless. Ha! Xiaoming laughed dryly and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He did not know how to answer. He could not say that he was a traveler and that he was the protagonist. This was a place that gave him opportunities. There was no danger. He looked at the stone door with lingering fear. There was a thumb-sized hole under the stone door. It was so deep that he could not see the bottom. It was as if the hole had penetrated the ground and reached the underground lava. Through the small hole, one could see that there seemed to be endless flames burning inside. Ungrateful person kill. Around the hole, there was a string of small characters. It seemed to be the handwriting of a woman. There was a story here. Xiaoming naturally thought of some gossip. A strange smile appeared on his face. Behind this door is the location of my mission. Gu Changqing looked at the stone door and frowned. Judging from the aura on the stone door, it was very dangerous. What was the secret behind the stone door? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.